I am strong, strong, strong!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. My name is Derek Melinda. I am your host. This is our brand new sort of kind of setup. We're playing around with some ideas, so this may not be permanent, but we basically what I've been trying to do for a long time here is set up a situation where I can have a series of monitors surrounding my office and then be able to talk directly into the camera. And so this is where we're at today. So hopefully this is working. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. And everything like that. Music slightly loud. Okay, cool. Thank you. It's funny. Last time we were here, everyone was saying the music not loud enough. So go figure. We can't please everybody. So welcome to the stream. And again, like I said, I basically have turned my situation around. So the wall behind me is what I used to film on, and now I'm actually facing the other way, and that's going to allow me a little bit more room to set up some different monitors and different microphone things. I eventually want to get Ben says, get better headphones. I do want to get eventually get a oh goodness, like some sort of shotgun mic, because I do want to be able to have this. I like the sound that this microphone gives, obviously, but especially when I'm GMing during my APs, it gets a little bit in the way. I'm trying to multitask things. I'm trying to move all over the place, and it can be a little bit distracting to have this big microphone right in my face. And while again, I like the sound that it generates, I'm not a big fan of it being basically right in my face. And I guess that's same thing long term. If we ever get back into the studio, I definitely want to be able to use some sort of shotgun mics or something like that for my players, so that we can basically get the mics out of the way and just roll some dice. Zolgathor, we'll see you right back. Has Derek lost weight, or is it because he's wearing black? Definitely because I'm wearing black. Have not lost any weight. In theory, I would like to assume that I have, but I actually have not. So, but I'll thank you. I'll take a self-confessed cynic. Let's see, who do we got in here today? Looks like we got a lot of people. We got Anthony, Ben, of course, Damien, Elgis. We've got Greg, London, Matthias, Pillberry, a goat, the self-confessed cynic himself, and of course, Silverwolf, the Zolgathor, and Thrillix. It's kind of a cool name. Thrillkillix. So, what are we here for today? Well, first things first, I don't know why that tip goal is not coming in. There we go. That's something weird. David. Yes, of course. Anion from your northern region. David, welcome. Kill Skrillex. All right. Luigi, hello as well to you as well. Yeah. So what's been going on? How is everybody doing? Again, this is a work in progress. I want to get the Knights of Last Call neon sign, LED sign that we had made. Nick's dad made it for us, and I want to get that into my office behind me, and do a couple other things as well. Again, working in the space that I have here, but the main thing that I am going for here is well, here, this is going to be really stupid. I don't know a better way to do it, so I'm actually going to do it this way. Hey, what's going on? All right, we'll see if if this can actually be picked up. Come on, there we go. So this is actually my view. So I have the lights on my left and right of me, and then in the middle actually is my camera. But my camera is mounted in a teleprompter, and I actually have the chat right now. Actually, is in my teleprompter. So even though I am looking directly into the camera, I can go ahead and read this chat. I notice your 4 ebooks are front and center. What we need is more self-shot. That looks cool AF. So this allows me to read the chat and look into the camera. I know it's a stupid thing, but it's a personal pet peeve of mine. I hate looking off to the side, and the main reason I don't like doing this is during AP, during the actual play, I want to have my Zoom call front and center, so I can look into the eyes of people as I'm talking to them. One of my my biggest gripes about working from home is a lot of times people's camera is not aligned. So when they want to look at you, you can't look at the person you're talking to because the camera and the thing are, wait, he just says whatever we type here? Oh no, he's figured it out. And so this way, during the actual plays, I can look into the camera and be connecting with everybody and still be, hey, Greg.
Tip $10.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate the tip. Thank you so much, Greg. That's very generous of you. No message, Greg. Just being cool. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, I couldn't think of a good tip goal today. If I had a tip goal, it would be, oops, we spent too much on art. For the new AP, we tried to get the price down, but it's just the stuff we all like tends to just be very expensive, and everybody wants to have a custom piece of art done, and of course we wanted to get a custom overlay made, so all these things start adding up. And originally I set a budget for $200 total, and then Bob and Smith come back to me with artists that they really like that are like $75 to $100 a piece. So what are you gonna do? Matthias says, wait a second, I thought we were told there was a $400 stretch goal to everyone cosplays. Number one, that was a $500 stretch goal. Number two, I was informed that it would be funnier if I was the only person who had to cosplay. So, I think that feels right to me. So, that it would be funnier if it was just me. But the third thing that I wanted to do with this setup is I want to be able to record more videos. And if it's not apparent to anyone, this channel is all about our patrons. They're the reason we're still doing this. We had fun doing it the first year, but once it became apparent that, okay, this is going to, if we want to do this the right way, we're going to have to put a lot of time and effort into this. And we have some expenses, probably a lot more expenses than the standard YouTube channel does, because a lot of folks just do it out of their room, kind of like what I'm doing right here. But of course, now we have a studio, and of course, I wanted to invest in good lighting and good cameras and all that other stuff. Ironically, now our actual play is online with Foundry, and we barely get into the studio except to do a couple of occasional product videos. Hey, good night, Juho. We'll see you tomorrow. And but there's a lot of videos that I'd like to make that, quite frankly, just don't make sense to have a big, over elaborate setup. And I really would love to be able to just turn on my camera and make a video and make it short, sweet, scripted, very tightly controlled. Type down, think about what I want to say it, get it published. Not have everything on this channel be these epic long rants. I know a lot of people love the big, long, epic, long rants, but it's not always necessarily the best thing for the channel. So this is kind of an opportunity for me to do the best of both worlds, and I like the idea of being able to have a teleprompter so that if I do have some bullet points or things that I want to say, it makes it just that much easier for me to say them. So, plus this new setup, again, we're in the middle of it, but it's going to make it a lot easier for me to put some sound control into this room. Whereas before I was literally in the corner of my office, right there, basically off screen. And a corner is like the worst place you can be for acoustics. So now I'm actually in the middle of the room, and I'm going to be able to put some sound treatment here, and here, and I think it'll work a lot better. Now I know what you might be thinking, Derek, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters to me. So, hey, K-Swiss Stack, why don't you have D&D title to attract plebs? Well, again, I'm not that mean. Better boss fight made for 5e or building a better boss fight in D&D. I don't know. I had a sort of a weird moment where I was kind of like, do I hate 5e or is it just something that, like, or do I just hate it because everybody else likes it? And I was trying to think about 5e, and I was like, well, I like, a lot of 5e is very simple. It's very stripped down and has a little bit of complexity. I like basic D&D. it's just a little bit too simplistic. And I really like 3rd edition D&D. I grew up playing 2nd edition D&D, and yeah, 5th edition D&D really does feel like kind of the love child of 3rd edition, 2nd edition, and basic. And so part of me was kind of like, why don't I like this game more? And I almost had this like moment of like, oh, I need to start trying it out. Which isn't to say that I won't play a 5e game again. It's just I can't really figure out exactly why I hate it. Remind me to discuss adding a cloud to your room. All right, Ben, I will do so. A cloud, I assume, it's like a noise panel on the ceiling. Boothby says, I'm so happy our 5e holdouts finally agreed to give Pathfinder 2 another shot. That's great. Again, I don't think Pathfinder 2 is for every group. And I know some people were a little surprised to hear me say that, but I really don't think it is for every group. It is a game that has increased the level of complexity in order to, not by much, I mean, but by a noticeable amount. It increased the complexity in order to give the game a little, a bit more depth. And unfortunately, that's not for everybody. Some people don't want some people are happy with checkers, and you could try to tell them that chess is a better game and that it's a more robust and deep game, but they're happy with checkers. They don't necessarily need to play chess, and they don't want to play chess, and that's okay. So, Anthony says he saw a doggy tail. Maple. Maple. Well, apparently not. Case Swistek finally got their hands on Burning Wheel. Oh, there you are. Come here. Yes. This is Maple. Hi, Maple. Oh, thank you. This is one of our 2 dogs. She's very, very cute. That's a good doggy. Good. You liked him? Hello. All right. All right. Anyways, so if you've ever heard the dogs barking, that's one of the 2 dogs. Now they're fighting in the room. Stop. Anyways, we're going way off here today. So why are we here? Well, so we're here to talk about boss monsters, believe it or not. Thank you, Self-Confessed Cynic, for Maple. Yes, my dog is Maple, which is an incredible name. Now they're going to be in here trying to. Their mom isn't home, so they're going to be in here trying to bother me. Damien, I will happily smite. Thank you, Self-Confessed Cynic, for the super chat. Appreciate it. Maple is an amazing dog. We got her from rescue, and she is a pit bull beagle mix. I'm not. Well, we could maybe do a whole other stream about my 5e thoughts on the game design, but just remember that rules are not only and feats and skills and powers and spells are not just telling you things that you can do. They're also, in a way, telling you all the things that you can't do. And so sometimes, rules can become a prison. They can actually restrict what you're able to do with the game. And that isn't always, necessarily a good thing. Which kind of brings us to boss fights. A little, maybe, sort of. So this all came about because of a conversation, as usual, that we were having on our Discord. And Mr. Self-Confessed Cynic and I were talking, as we often do, about the concept of the boss fight. So let's think first things first. Let's get a couple of nomenclatures out of the way. The first thing is that to even think about or discuss or even conceptualize the idea of the boss fight as being something distinctly different from anything else is already immediately a very gamist thing to do, or a very gamist thing to talk about. And again, we're talking about GNS here, right? Gamist, narrativist, simulationist. In a gamist mindset, you are basically distinguishing between this creature and this creature by saying this creature is, quote unquote, the boss. And so whenever you start talking about boss rules or boss fights, you are immediately shifting your game into a more gamist or mechanical mindset, more of a video game mindset, for lack of a better term, a board game mindset. You're looking at your role-playing game, and you're not thinking about it as if it was a story, like a narrativist game. You're not thinking about it as if it was like a real-world simulation, like you would with a simulationist game. You're thinking about it as if it was a game to be played. And so immediately right off the bat, anything with a boss mechanic is kind of gamey. Now, self-confessed. That's pretty low. Let the GNS flow through you. N is okay, I guess. N is the direction. N is the direction that role-playing games are definitely going. People are definitely, I would say, on whole, maybe not this chat, maybe not this Discord, maybe not this Patreon, but as a whole, I would say that people are more interested in telling stories with their role-playing games now than they are with, with an interesting mechanical game or with any sort of simulation of reality. So, narrativist games are coming. Now, what's funny about this is they all play 5th edition D&D, and 5th edition D&D is most definitely not a narrativist game. It is ever so slightly more narrativist than Pathfinder 2nd edition, but just barely. And both of those are fairly low on the limit. And so again, it's I don't know. It makes me an elitist gatekeeping fuck, I guess, but like they are playing the wrong game. Because they are playing a game that is meant for, combat and exploration, and they're using it for a bunch of social encounters and making stuff up and all this other stuff. And so it's really funny to me. Again, it's not like it's a bad thing. It's, to me, it's somebody playing chess, it's someone playing checkers with the chess pieces. Right? Like they don't have the black or the red circle pieces. They've got a bunch of pawns and kings and bishops, and they don't know what any of those do. They're using them set up like they're playing checkers. That's kind of the metaphor I'm going to say. I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, that works, I guess. I mean, that is fine. So anyways, so boss mechanics are inherently very, and we have to have a framework, right? Before we can get into any discussion, we have to understand a framework. And again, my setup's kind of crazy right now. Otherwise, I would whiteboard this, like we were doing an episode of Night School. But you had all these editions of D&D, 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, and believe it or not, okay, this is a little bit of 3rd edition D&D lore, which I think leaked its way into Pathfinder 1. But in 1st edition D&D and in 2nd edition D&D, you had no such thing as a boss fight. This idea of creatures which had different mechanics that enabled them to become a boss. 3rd edition, on the surface, didn't have boss mechanics either. There was no way to make a creature be better at being, a sort of final end boss type creature. Openly. Secretly, there was. And this is a little bit of 3rd edition lore for D&D, but the creators of 3rd edition purposely under-CR'd or under-challenge rating or under-leveled dragons. So, using the math of the game, a young red dragon or something should have been like a CR7, but it was actually, in the book, it was like a CR5 or CR4. The Wormling White Dragon, I think, is a CR1, and I think the Wormling White Dragon should have been like a CR2 or maybe a 3. And the game designers did this because that was sort of their way of making dragons kind of like a boss fight, because the creature was just very powerful for its level. It was this very difficult fight. So you would look at the math of the game and say, okay, well, I'm going to throw a CR1 or a CR2 monster at it, but I'm going to use a dragon. Well, functionally, that was like throwing something that was 1 or 2 levels higher than what you were intending to do. And the dragon fight would end up feeling really, really tough. And of course, in 3rd edition terms, tough meant more hit points, more damage, better saves, higher attack roll, higher armor class. And that all in all meant that you were going to miss more when you were attacking. You were going to get hit more. The creature was going to pass saves against spells you threw against it. If it had, breath weapon, you were likely to fail the DC. And so all in all, the fight was going to be a very, very difficult fight. Oh, yeah. Lance, I was talking about an online virtual whiteboard. I have one on my computer. I don't have my, when I was moving everything, I put away my, my digital pen and my digital sketchboard. So the idea here is that this boss concept sort of came in 3rd edition, but where it really blew up big time was in 4th edition. And so 4th edition was the first time in D&D that they took a step back and they said, okay, we are going to go in a very gamist direction. People, at the time, in the early 2000s, MMORPGs were very popular. And so when 4th edition came out in 2007, 2008, they were like, this is the wave of popularity right now. You have this huge genre of people, this huge game, crux of people who, soccer moms were playing World of Warcraft. You'd go to a college frat house and everyone would be playing World of Warcraft. So there was this zeitgeist around video games, and 4th edition tried to capture that. It said, hey, RPGs have always been about, not the Joe Schmo or Mary Sue. It's about just these nerdy people sitting in their basements playing games. What if we could tap into this mainstream concept? And so 4th edition was born. Love it or hate it, it was a game that tried to gamify the game of Dungeons and Dragons. It tried to define things very well. It tried to eliminate ambiguity. It tried to turn the game into having strong board game elements. It tried to bring in this idea of, instead of in 1st edition or 2nd edition or even 3rd edition, a lot of the classes were balanced against each other by being really weak in some areas and very strong in other areas. It's crazy to imagine this, but in 1st edition and 2nd edition D&D and 3rd edition D&D, wizards had D4 hit points. And in the first 2 editions of the game, probably no constitution bonus to hit points. So you're talking about, a 5th level wizard, and you rolled for it, by the way. So a 5th level wizard might have 10 hit points, and you died at 0 hit points. So yeah, Fireball, very, very powerful, but, one hit from a creature, definitely one critical hit from a creature, and you were dead. And that's how they balance the game. And, that's the kind of balancing a game that, quite frankly, I think a lot of modern gamers would say is not a good balance. And so, you want the character classes became kind of more and more similar. Even in Pathfinder 1, which is derived from 3rd edition, the wizards suddenly got D6 hit points. Wizards gained more ways to gain armor class, certainly culminating in Pathfinder 2, where typically the wizard or the sorcerer or whatever is only going to have 1 or 2 points of armor class lower than everybody else. And quite frankly, in a lot of builds, and once your dexterity gets high enough, their armor class is going to be the same as everyone else's. And again, they're at 6 hit points per level, just like a lot of the other classes were. So they're much more survivable. And so yeah, I guess they can't be as powerful. So in a game like World of Warcraft, you had to make the wizards and the sorcerers play a lot more like the fighters and the hunters, or the rangers. And so in 4th edition, you had all these discrete powers, but you also did this for the monsters. And if you're not familiar with it, 4th edition introduced the idea of a series of templates that you could apply to a monster. I shouldn't even say that it's a template that you apply to a monster, because you couldn't just take a normal creature and make it a solo. Rather, these were descriptive traits that were given to monsters that were designed to fill a role. And there was a couple of them. One of them, which is very famous, is called the Minion. And the Minion, well, hold on a sec here. Thrillkillix. I'm talking, yes, of course there was the boss. Oh, the vampire, the necromancer, the big stone giant, right? Those are all bosses. I'm talking about mechanically defining the boss using a different set of rules than what you use for other creatures. So to be clear, yes, there were definitely bosses, 100%. I'm talking about creatures, though, that follow different sets of rules. So now, granted, maybe back then people could have easily did whatever they wanted to and cheated. But, that wasn't in the rules. So in 4th edition, you had the Minion, which everybody kind of generally knows these days. And the Minion was a way that you could build a creature that essentially allowed you to use hordes of creatures, and they only had 1 hit point. They were weird, right? Because hit points are already an abstraction, but the idea was 1 hit, they died, but yet they weren't like 4 to 5 levels lower than the party member, and they could never hit them. So one of the other templates that they used in this game was solo. And what a solo boss was designed to do, so 4th edition D&D was designed, the monster math was designed that you would fight an equivalent number of creatures that were equal to the party's level for a normal fight. For whatever reason, maybe because of World of Warcraft, 4th edition standard party size when it came to determining things was 5 players. So that was the default, was 5 players. So they assumed a party of 5 people. And so if you wanted to make a normal fight, you would, and let's say your party was level 7. So you would pull 5 level 7 monsters against a level 7 party, and that was a good fight. But a solo monster was designed to fight an entire person of entire party rather of 5 people. But it wasn't level 10, because the math in 4th edition, kind of like Pathfinder 2, you were adding your level to all of your skills and saves and attack rolls and armor classes. So a creature that was 3 or 4 levels higher than the party would be very, very difficult to hit. It would hit you all the time. If this sounds familiar, it's because this is what Pathfinder 2 does. So instead, a solo monster in 4th edition would be the same level as all the other monsters you were fighting. So if your party was level 7 and you wanted to throw a reasonably tough fight at them, you would throw 5 level 7 monsters at them. But if you wanted to just throw 1 monster at them, you didn't have to throw a level 10 monster at them. No, you threw a level 7 solo monster. Now, to be clear, similar to Pathfinder 2, maybe not as good because the math is a whole lot better in Pathfinder 2. But if you looked at the experience point totals, you could throw 1 level 10 monster, I think 10, maybe 11, at a party in 4th edition that was level 7. And the math of the game, or the XP total of the game, would say that one level 10 monster provided enough experience points to challenge a level 7 party. So 1v5. But this is where the mechanics of the game come in. Because while you could have thrown a level 11 monster at your party of level 7 PCs, the way that that monster would be challenging would be by having extremely high defenses and extremely high attack rolls relative to the party. They decided that, essentially, they didn't think that was very fun. So the reason being that missing a lot is not fun. Getting hit all the time, not very fun. So what they decided to do is, can we take a level 7 monster and not buff up its stats, not give it, a really huge attack roll or a really huge armor class? Can we keep it like a level 7 monster, but change it so that it functions as a challenge for an entire party? And this was the solo. And there were a couple of ways that they accomplished this in 4th edition. So the first one, and we'll definitely see this when we start talking about 5th edition and some of the problems. The first thing is the solo had 4 to 5 times as many hit points as a standard creature of its level. It literally took, if you were supposed to be fighting 4 or 5 monsters level 7, this creature basically had 4 or 5 creatures worth of hit points in one body. So you're talking about a creature with, if normally a level 7 creature had 80 hit points, this creature is, 350, 400 hit points. So that's number one. Number two, in 4th edition D&D, I'm distracted. K-Swiss Texas. We're at Clownish Curse level, reading level of viewers. We're bouncing all over the place here. We're getting up there. So in 4th edition, players could accumulate action points, and action points were a way, kind of like hero points, except instead of letting you re-roll a d20, they let you basically take an extra turn. It lets you take an extra action, basically. And so action points were a way for heroes to sort of, if they wanted to basically get to do 2 things in a turn, cast 2 spells, make 2 big attacks. So action points lets you kind of go twice. Well, solo creatures had 2 action points. And so in the course of a fight with a solo creature, now they work just like normal creatures in 4th edition, where they got 1 initiative spot, but they could use these action points to kind of sometimes go twice and make it feel like it was kind of dynamic. The third thing is most solos, all solos, had a variety of abilities. So not math. Their math was pretty much the same as any other level 7 creature, but they had abilities that enabled them to be much more dynamic and much more reactive and much more expansive with the party. So they would have a lot of reactions. They would have certain free actions that they could do. They would have auras. They would have all sorts of things that made them feel more impactful, instead of just going once and then having 4 to 5 party members go and then them going again. And instead of relying on them being extremely potent and extremely powerful and extremely deadly on that one turn, they basically allowed the creature to kind of spread out its damage a little bit more. So that was how 4th edition did solos. Now, I experimented a lot. A lot of people did with solos in 4th edition. And we can talk about this concept later on. It's kind of tied to 4th edition, but with things like trying to give them more actions per combat round, because at the end of the day, the problem was still much like it is in you hear it all the time in 5th edition about action economy. When the group goes 5, when the party has 5 members and the enemy team only has 1, in an initiative-based system, it is very, very problematic. And Pathfinder 2 has gotten around this by going with the jack up the stats route. And so Pathfinder 2 fights with bosses are, in my opinion, very, very swingy, because Pathfinder 2 bosses do have more hit points, but not that much more hit points. And it's still the case that you need a 15 or 16 or even a 17 to hit some of these higher level monsters. Now, I understand that there are tactics, and think we've done a lot of videos on these, where you can, I'll aid and we'll flat foot him with a flank, and I managed to get a fear off on him, and he saved, but he's frightened 1, so he's got -1 to his AC, and I have a heroism level 5 cast on me, so that's a +2 status bonus. So it's like, okay, and you add that all up, and okay, yes, cool. I mean, that is the style of game that they chose to go with, which is fine, and it's fun. But I mean, I will say it can get repetitive as well. That does, just because it's interesting to do doesn't mean it's interesting to do all the time. And that's on like sort of the attacking them side of things. Okay, on the defensive side, you're just screwed. I mean, the fact of the matter is, as we go through these spells, and I know a lot of people like to disagree with, our spell ratings, but the fact is like in a world of Pathfinder 2, between incapacitation and the fact that these creatures have insanely high saves, if you are fighting a creature that is party level 3 or higher, the fact of the matter is it's silly or suicide to cast a spell that does not have some sort of an effect on the creature successfully passing the save. Because the fact of the matter is they are probably 75% or more likely to pass your save. And, a good chunk of that is even a critical success. So it's that has warped our impression of how spells are valued and what spells are meant to do. There are a lot of spells, there are a lot of effects in the game where we look at it and we say, this is exactly the kind of effect that I would love to use on a powerful creature. But the way the game works, it doesn't really work against that powerful creature. So it's kind of, unfortunate. Anthony says PF2 bosses will just crit you and one-shot you, at least at lower levels. I mean, they can maybe not quite one-shot you, but I mean, my halfling cleric, we're talking about 8 hit points plus 14 cons, so 10 hit points per level, around level 9 or so 90 hit points. He had a little bit of damage on him from some incidental type stuff, and I got crit. I got taken out 1 hit by a boss. So yeah, I mean, even at higher levels, I mean, maybe level 9 isn't super higher level, but it could be pretty brutal. And Total Mystery says, yeah, level +3 creatures are just not fun to use for either party. Either the creature gets shut out or the party struggles to hit them. And this gets to what I was talking to about the swinginess of the fight. Because, in a perfect world, right, a bunch of people in the party would attack the boss. And because of its high armor class or its high spell, high saves, all of its high saves, maybe one of them hits. And the creature takes, a chunk of damage. 20% or something, 25% of its life. And you're like, okay, that's the way it's supposed to work out. But, we're talking about very short, we're not rolling thousands of die rolls here. We're talking about maybe you roll 20 or 30 dice over the course of a combat. It is well within the variance models that a fight starts and everybody in the party hits in the first round. It could happen. It could also happen that everybody in the party misses for like 2 rounds in a row and you're just kind of dead. So the level of variance with these fights is way, way, way too high. Now, I know what you're saying, like, oh, well, hey, that's just the way the game works, just roll with the punches. Agreed to a certain extent, but there's also this idea that part of the reason we're playing Pathfinder 2 is because we want a more tactical and nuanced game, and I think just jacking up the defenses, while I will promise you this, at least from what I've seen of the game after these 2.5 years, the math works. It does work. The variance is all over the place. I will say that. The boss fights can be very swingy, one way or the other. Sometimes I feel like we just get wiped out and we didn't have a chance. And other times I feel like we just kicked the thing's ass, and it was kind of like that was a boss. And I'm talking about like extreme encounters here, party level +3, party level +4 encounters. And so, and quite frankly, for a lot of players, variance can be a bad thing, because when you can only come on, you can come on the upside of variance as many times as you want, but you come on the downside of variance even just once, and that might be the TPK that it kills the party or ends the campaign. So the losing side of the variance is very, very, very cataclysmic. A lot of chat here. By the way, we here at Knights of the Last Call appreciate you sticking with us. If you're interested in dropping a super chat or tip, we have a link below. You can also type !tip, and that'll give you an option. If you want to have what you want typed read to the chat, or even text to speech if you use tip. And of course, we also, this whole conversation came about because of a conversation in our Discord. So feel free to check that out as well. But again, Explosions. That's a cool name. Explosions. I don't know. Are you new to the channel? I don't recognize your name. Welcome, Explosions. Thoughts on taking a PL +1 creature and just giving it 2 initiative entries and some extra meat abilities for PF2 solos. I personally like it over PL2 +2/+3, so PCs can actually hit and do fun stuff. So what Explosions is saying here is exactly what I did in the Rise of the Rune Lords adventure path. So I would take, what you would consider to be the bosses, creatures like Nualia, the Asamar boss of the first adventure, Burnt Offerings. I did exactly as that. I did her as a PL +1 creature, and I gave her 2 initiative entries as sort of a quick and dirty way. And I basically doubled her hit points. And I made it so that one of her initiative entries, now we're getting into this, and I apologize if this is kind of all over the place, but I was kind of busy today. In case you didn't, the patrons know this, but like 2 hours ago, this room was just stacked with books to the ceiling, and I've been trying to rush around and get it finished up. So anyways, what I did is I made one of her initiatives a spellcaster, basically. Like on that initiative, she would cast a spell, and then her other initiative order was more melee focused, and she would swing her sword, and she would do that type of stuff. So I'm just reading all this chat here. Whoa, spoilers. True. Yeah, Shadam, it's like the Etten. They get 2 initiatives, 2 actions each. I'm planning on doing something similar for my 3-headed T-Rex boss. Here's the problem. Okay? This is the problem with everything. The problem with everything is my dog's barking. Guys, the problem with everything is that we have this turn-based initiative system, okay? And we have delay and we have ready. And actually, in the Rise of the Rune Lord campaign, the group fought an Etten, and it was cool. It was like, oh, it's got 2 initiative counts, right? And then the party all ended up just delaying. So now it became the Etten went, and then the party went. The Etten went, and then the party went. And it didn't feel any different. I mean, because of the way that Frightened works, especially against a creature like an Etten, who gets multiple turns, actions per turn. If it was my turn, and then the Etten's turn, and then the Etten's turn, and I frightened it 2, let's say it failed its save, it would be frightened 2 on its turn, then frightened 1 at the end, and then it would be frightened 1 on its second turn, and it would be frightened 0 at the end. And my party members would get no benefit from me frightening it at all, aside from the monster making attacks. And because of the way that things like Frighten, because of the way things like aid and delay and flanking work in Pathfinder 2, in my experience, most groups end up with the initiative kind of ending up being us and them. And you get a lot of initiatives where it's just all of us and all of them. So it's weird that it works that way, but it does kind of work that way. So what is one possible solution? Well, and one of the things that was discussed in this discussion was this whole thing started because Self-Confessed Cynic knew that I was talking about D&D miniatures. So what is D&D miniatures? D&D Miniatures was a game that was created to be a competitive tournament level D&D game where you just fought. It was kind of like Warhammer or Star Wars Age of Rebellion, or Legions, I think maybe it's called Star Wars Legions. And the whole point of this D&D Miniatures was to take the third edition, it was third edition D&D combat rules, clean them up a little bit so that you didn't need a GM, and allow one player to build a sort of war band of between 2 to 12. Oh, we got a super chat from Self-Confessed Cynic. Hey, initiative and actions are the clinching points. I wonder whether bosses can be achieved with a template, e.g. a million reactions, or whether they're served better by a rule set, a la free archetype and automatic bonus progression. Well, Self-Confessed Cynic, thank you for that very generous $10 super chat. And because you gave a $10 super chat, I will answer you now. No, I do not believe that they can be achieved by templating. Yet, no, I do not agree with Smith that everything in Pathfinder 2 needs to be modeled using existing concepts in Pathfinder 2. Yes, it does increase the complexity. But what we are talking about here is adding additional depth, and that means we need to increase the complexity. I think that what Smith was suggesting, which is kind of like almost like a fourth edition solo, or like a fifth edition boss monster with its sort of legendary actions and legendary reactions and stuff like that. Can you achieve something very similar without really creating a whole new system, which I will admit is complicated? And can you do that and then basically give the creature like a trigger or a reaction when at the end of a player's turn, if the player is adjacent, this reaction, and then maybe give the monster 2 or 3 or 4 reactions. And so I think that is fine. I think you could probably make that work. But ultimately, I don't think you would get the same feel of game. And I'll tell you why. And this is the answer why. Okay, this is the answer why. And we'll get to this here in a second. But to talk about the D&D Miniatures game first. So this is a D&D Miniatures card. So D&D Miniatures was a strategic skirmish level board game where you would get 200 points or 300 points or something to make a like little mini. It was like a mini army, right? And I would do the same, and then we would compete. Okay, we would compete. But what was interesting about D&D Miniatures is each round you rolled initiative. They rolled a d20, you rolled a d20, and I think you added your leader's war boss initiative modifier. So, Self-Confessed Cynic might roll d20 plus 5, I roll d20 plus 7. If you win the initiative, you get to pick, okay, whether you go first or your opponent goes first. But here's the key. The way that the game worked is it wasn't that if, let's say I had 10 miniatures or 10 models in my little mini army and Self-Confessed Cynic had 10. It wasn't like if I won initiative, all 10 of my little guys would get their turn, and then all 10 of Self-Confessed Cynic's people would get their turn. That's not the way it worked. What worked is I would activate 2 of mine, then Self-Confessed Cynic would activate 2 of his. Then I would activate 2 of mine, and then Self-Confessed Cynic would activate 2 of his. So there was this natural back and forth. And there was a lot of strategy to do to it, because if you had a very powerful miniature, or model, you might want to activate them first to try to maybe get a powerful attack out before the your opponent had a chance to respond. Alternatively, you might save that model, that very powerful model, until later in the round, and that way you kind of understand the lay of the land. Oh, which models are hurt, which models are weak, which models are in which positions, which models are target priorities. So there was a lot of strategy about which activations you would go. And if you've ever played Warhammer 40K or Warhammer Fantasy, you'll know that this is very similar to the way that you deploy your army. Your opponent, or you, depending on who rolls well, depending on who rolls higher, your opponent places down one of their units, then you place down one of your units, then your opponent places down one of your units, and back and forth. And there's kind of a mini game to that because you kind of want to save your powerful units until the end because you want to know what your opponent is doing, where your opponent is planning on going. But if you wait too long, it's possible that you might not be able to put them in the exact spot that you want them to be put. So it's kind of a cool mini game. So that's D&D minis, right? I get to activate 2, you get to activate 2, and we go back and forth. Now, it goes without saying that as the game progressed, your miniatures would get killed, and then I would activate 2, you'd activate 2, I'd activate 2, you'd activate 2, and now, oops, I only have one guy left. So I get to activate that one guy, and then you get to activate all the rest of your minis. So there was kind of an advantage to making sure that you could have enough miniatures, because if you didn't have enough miniatures, sure, you could make a more powerful army. You could have only 5 or 6 minis in your army and have them cost 30 or 40 or 50 points apiece. But then your opponent might come and have 12 activations, and they could just maybe they have a bunch of little crappy minion type monsters and they just activate them first while you're making your moves. And then your turn is completely over. And then I get to go 6 activations in a row. Okay. So that was very, very, very powerful. And if that sounds very, very powerful, that's kind of what Pathfinder 2 boss fights are like, right? The boss probably goes first because his initiative is really good. He does his big attack. And then the party gets to just do everything in a row, knowing that the boss isn't going to really do anything. Now, D&D miniatures worked fine, and then it was fun. We used to go to Gen Con. Tim and I would go to Gen Con. We would strategize. We'd build war bands. We had bought a lot of D&D miniatures, so we decided, hey, well, we should use these for this. Go play in actual sponsored and official tournaments. And then about a year or two into the D&D miniatures, they came out with, and D&D miniatures was also sort of an excuse to sell miniatures for your role-playing game. D&D miniatures came out with a model, which was the, which was the Gargantuan Black Dragon. Okay? And I'm going to change here, and hopefully this doesn't destroy everything. Okay. So this is actually a Colossal Red Dragon, but it works for our purposes. I couldn't find the other one on the screen. So what a colossal dragon was it used the same rules as oh my goodness, what's going on here? There we go. Sorry. Didn't realize it was so messed up. It used the same rules as, oh my goodness. Okay, sorry everybody. I see now what's going on. Okay. There we go. All right. I accidentally put this into a group. You should never, ever put anything in OBS into a group unless you never plan on ever moving it ever again, because it will be a massive pain to your ass. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. All right, so this is a Colossal Red Dragon. This is the most powerful one that they made. So the way that this thing worked was, this was a one-man or one dragon army. Remember how before I said that you could have up to 12 miniatures? Well, when you played somebody who had a Colossal Red Dragon, you had 1,000 points to build your 12-man, 12-woman crew. And your opponent got to play with just this one card, just this creature, just the Colossal Red Dragon. And this thing had 800 hit points, which is obviously a ton. And now we get to one of the first problems with Pathfinder 2. We get to one of the biggest problems with 5th edition D&D, which is this. In those games, and this is also, by the way, the problem with adding reactions to a boss monster. There is no sense of progression. There is no sense that the party is making or gaining headway. There is no sense that we're getting anywhere because we work in a hit point system. And in Pathfinder 2nd edition and in D&D 5th edition, a creature with 1 hit point has just the same number of actions, the same attack roll, and the same everything as everybody else, as when they were at full hit points, for example. And so you're fighting this big, huge bank of hit points in 5th edition. And in 2nd edition Pathfinder, the creatures don't have a tremendous amount of hit points, but they do have really high ACs. And you're missing a lot. But you hit them, and then you hit them, and you hit them, and then you don't have to hit them hundreds of times. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you don't have to hit them a bunch like you would in 5th edition D&D. But the fact is, it doesn't really feel like you're getting anywhere. Now, 4th edition D&D tried to deal with this, not just for solo monsters, but for all monsters, by having a lot of monsters have some sort of ability or some sort of change or some sort of effect when they reach 50% hit point, also known as bloodied. And we still use this term even for games that don't have them. For no other reason than it's a good thing as a player to just know, okay, cool, that was 50%. We are through 50%. We've got it. Like we have a sense of where we are on a on a scale of progression. But in using solos as an example from the D&D 4th edition game, using dragons rather, in that game, dragons had a breath weapon, just like every dragon does. And they could breathe their breath weapon, and then you would roll every turn. You would roll a 6-sided die, and I think on a roll of 5 or maybe a roll of a 6, their breath weapon would recharge, and they could use it again. This is very similar to Pathfinder 2, where you roll a d4 and you count down the number of rounds until they use their breath weapon. But in 4th edition, every dragon, Dylan just said it, spoiler alert, Dylan says here correctly that in 4th edition, every dragon, which was a solo, by the way, had an ability called Bloodied Breath. And Bloodied Breath said that when a dragon got below 50% hit points, its breath weapon immediately recharged, and it got to immediately use it, even on its off turn. So, the barbarian or the fighter just hit the dragon with a big attack, landed it. That brought the dragon below half hit point. The GM or the DM would yell out, "Bloodied," which was, it was such a cool, this is independent of anything about solos, but it was awesome as the GM to yell that out to your players because it was kind of like a high five moment. Even if you were fighting relatively normal creatures, maybe not like a bunch of, minions or mooks, but if you were fighting, 2 or 3 or 4 monsters or an elite type monster or higher level monster, and when the GM yelled out "bloodied," it was like a great way for it was a shorthand to say, hey, cool, we are halfway through this. But it was also a great way for players to communicate to their party, okay, I am officially in danger. I am below half hit points. So when a player yelled, if I hit a player for 35 damage, they would just go, "bloodied." So it was a very cool way to use that. Phantom says, isn't that the same as a reaction with the trigger, I reach 50%? Yes, it is, Phantom. That is a very excellent, yes, 100%. So, and you could totally model that. The only caveat or the only catch is the way Pathfinder 2 works, obviously, is theoretically, if the creature doesn't have a reaction available, it's unable to do that. So that's a little bit awkward, but you could get away with it. It is functionally the same thing. And I think it's an important thing just because of, you know, the reaction in 4th edition being bloodied. It was always at 50% hit points. In Pathfinder 2, I mean, technically this was true in 4th edition too, but in Pathfinder 2, you could use any language you want. You could have a reaction when the creature reaches 50%. You could have a separate reaction, when the creature reaches 20%. The key here, oh man, it's so, yeah, there's so much to talk about. The thing here is what we want to be able to avoid are gotchas. Okay. And I know we've talked about these on the channel before, but the advantage to bloodied is that everyone in the game understands that sometimes things, like it's not uncommon for things to have an effect at half hit points. It's part of something that you are automatically programmed and aware of. In fact, after you've fought a dragon the first time, maybe it takes you the second time, but you understand, okay, we know that at some point in the fight, when we get it to the point where it feels like the fight is turning in our favor because we've just reduced the creature to half hit points or less, paradoxically, that's also a very powerful turn for the creature because it immediately gets to recharge its breath weapon, and it immediately gets to use its breath weapon on its off turn. And it's a great pacing mechanic, but most importantly, it's not unexpected. People don't go, wait a second, what's bloody? Wait, this thing does something at 50% hit point? Wait, what? I've never seen this effect before. So it's a quantity, like it's kind of like Attack of Opportunity, which was good and then bad and then good and then bad again. So what I mean is, the advantage to Attack of Opportunity was that you knew everyone had it in older editions of the game, and you could play around that, right? It wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a gotcha. It was a known tactical factor that you could adjust for. And so in Pathfinder 2nd edition, they decided, guess what? We think that leads to stale combats because no one wants to provoke an Attack of Opportunity. They're just getting into combat and they're just staying there. And that's fine. I think that's fine. And they go, but we're going to give some creatures reactions. And a lot of those reactions are going to be Attack of Opportunity. And a lot of AP monsters and a lot of third-party monsters end up with Attack of Opportunity. But now it's worse because now you don't know. And so one of two things will happen, which is either people will act like, I don't know, maybe it does have Attack of Opportunity, and they're so afraid of them, and enough creatures have them that people go, unless I am 100% sure that this creature does not have Attack of Opportunity because I, know the game so well or whatever, I'm going to act like it does. And so I'm not, which you failed in your game design there because now people are not moving. Now people are standing still. Or two, people go, well, this is Pathfinder 2. Very few creatures have Attack of Opportunity. And there's no clear way or message. I mean, maybe as a GM, you should make it a point of saying, like, when a player closes within reach of the weapon, you go, he immediately begins menacing you with his spinning flail. And the player gets it. They understand. I am within the aura of this creature or the reach of this creature, and he has Attack of Opportunity. Because it could be worse when you go, well, very few creatures have Attack of Opportunity. What would make me think this creature would have Attack of Opportunity? So then you go ahead and, you move around like they intended, and the game punishes you. It punishes you. It says, you tried to be dynamic and move around and be, really, and nope, smash. I don't know what the percentage is, but like once 20%, 25% of creatures have Attack of Opportunity, they might as well all have Attack of Opportunity. I think that that's almost worse because now people are going to act like every creature has Attack of Opportunity, or they're going to get really punished and gotcha when they try to do something different. But going back to some of these points here, and I know we haven't actually even talked about this thing yet, although some of you probably have read it and figured it out. One of the points here. But I feel like this channel is just closeted 4E lovers in hopes of using PF2 as some sort of 4E homebrew. Not at all, Joseph. Not at all. There are many things that 4th edition did wrong. But consider this, Joseph. Consider this. 4th edition introduced the concept of adding your level to all of your skills, saves, attack, and armor class. No other edition of D&D has done that. 5th edition did not do it. So in 4th edition, you added your level to AC, saves, initiative, skills, attack roll, spell attack roll. What does that sound like? Okay, consider this. Number 2, in Pathfinder 2nd or in 4th edition, you got 3 actions a turn. You got a standard, a move, and a minor. Standard, move, and a minor. Yes, they were not the same 3 actions. A standard, a minor couldn't be used for a move or a standard. A move couldn't be used for a standard, and a standard could be used for any action. But you got 3 actions a turn: standard, move, minor. So you had 3 actions a turn. That's number 2. Number 3, fighters, barbarians, rangers all had cool abilities, feats, and powers that gave them these kind of cool actions that they could take that kind of gave them a lot more punch and pizzazz. 4, spellcasters' abilities were considerably restricted. The crazy save or die spells were eliminated, and wizards and clerics and druids where sorcerers were all brought much more into the same baseline of being like, hey, we're playing the same game as the fighters, barbarians, and rogues, so let's act like it. Let's be on that same level. So there's a lot actually in Pathfinder 2 that feels like it did come from 4th edition. 4th edition had the idea of an encounter power, which was a spell or ability, which after a fight came back after 5 minutes. Change that to 10 minutes, and I just described focus points and focus spells and key points from focus. So focus points and focus spells are basically encounter powers from 4th edition. Cantrips, those are at-will abilities from 4th edition. And your spells, well, those are like daily powers. So there's actually, I would say it's the opposite. I would say Pathfinder 2E has a lot of 4E DNA. So talking about 4th edition, I think is valuable to understanding where Pathfinder 2nd edition is. So sorry about that. K-Swiss Deck says, but game feel matters too. Yelling bloodied and it being universal communication for shit is going down and it elicits a response every time. I completely agree with you. And it's actually something I really miss from that. And I still use it sometimes. And some of the new players look at me like, I don't actually understand what that means. Brutus says, interesting design space. I did this to the Skeletal Monstrosity, which is a cool monster to do it with, by the way. I toyed around with a concept like that, announcing what 25%, 50%, and 70% of the enemy health gone, and each one gave a condition. I do like that. Joseph, though, says Pathfinder 2nd Edition wants quick combats versus cinematic ones, though. Lower HP, more damage. AKA Rocket Tag. Well, I don't like Rocket Tag, unfortunately. 4E's math was horrible. They fixed it in Monster Manual 3, but it was too late by then. K-Swiss6 says, when I GM PF2, I outright say enemies know which one of you have attack of opportunity, and you all know which enemies have attack of opportunity. Honestly, that's probably the best outcome. That's actually probably the best option, because even as a GM, I know that you have attack of opportunity. So then I get into this weird space of like, what does my monster know? Dylan says, I think it's like 17%, which number 1, I think is too high. Number 2, if you include third-party books, I think it's higher. And number 3 or 4, it doesn't matter, because the monsters that people use, and certainly the monsters that they put in APs, tend to have it a lot more. And I agree with what Brutus is saying here. Well, I also think that like attack of opportunity should be something that's communicated. I think it's something that should be on a like soldier, defender, fighter type monster only, and it should be specifically for the type of monster that wants to keep you locked down and almost like a guard or like a defensive monster. So let's talk though. What about making a boss initially strong and adding a negative addition to different hit points? The players are surprised in a positive way. I think that's a cool idea. And we can kind of talk about this, which is getting back to what I talked about before about Nualia, and you'll understand where this comes from. So we talked about before about progression being very important. Well, when you were playing D&D miniatures, you naturally had a sense of progression. I would start the game off with, my handful of monsters and miniatures and models, and you had your 10 miniatures and monsters. We start fighting. Okay, we start playing. Fireballs are thrown, magic missiles are thrown, knights engage with orc chieftains, right? Eventually, I start to lose a couple of miniatures. And now I have less activations each turn. Now you have 8 activations a turn because you lost a couple, but I'm down to 6 or 5 because I've lost 3 or 4 or 5 of my miniatures. And so it's very important to understand that you're getting this sense of, look, I'm winning. The enemy is going down. There are less of them than me. It's not an overwhelming advantage yet, but I can definitely get a sense that the tide of battle is turning in my advantage. We had a super chat here from Self-Confessed Cynic. We call this out. Now that the basics are laid out, let's reset. What do we want to achieve with the grid boss design? And what does the rule set need to do? All right. That is a great point. Thank you for the super chat. I just want to make sure that everybody who didn't get a chance to read this, particularly this upper right-hand corner here of this card, understands how this monster worked. The way this monster worked in D&D miniatures was it had 800 hit points. Every time this creature, lost 100 hit points, it would lose an activation turn. This monster got to activate, 8 times during the course of an initiative round. Okay, but remember that you got 2, I got 2, you got 2, I got 2, you got 2, I got 2. So it wasn't like this guy went 8 times in a row. There was a natural back and forth, except it was with this freaking Colossal Red Dragon. It would go, then you would go with 2 of your people, that it would get to go twice again, and then it would get to go twice again, right? And so it was this cool back and forth. But every time this thing lost 100 hit points, it would lose one of those 8 activations, just like you would lose one of your activations when one of your knights or orcs or ogres went down. And so as you continued to fight this thing and kill this thing and crush this thing and kill this thing, it would eventually start to lose activations and it would dwindle down. So there was this sense of progression. Not only did I know that its hit points were going lower, but I also knew that it was actually getting weaker. It wasn't going 8 times around now. It was only going to be going 6 times around or 5 times around. Furthermore, in this game, because it was 3rd edition based, there were instant death spells. There was disintegrates. There was death spells, slay living, that kind of stuff. Those spells still worked on this creature. It just had this ability here called Indomitable, which says, if this creature is subject to any effect that would eliminate it, but that does not deal damage, it is not destroyed, but instead takes 100 damage. So essentially, if you instantly killed this creature, instead of saying those effects don't work on this creature, you said, yeah, it basically does kill a creature, just like it would if you were fighting a normal warband with 10 or 11 miniatures in it. It kills one of this creature's activations. And boom, suddenly the creature's down to 700 hit points. Boom, suddenly it's got one less activation. Kind of like something had died. But what's also cool about this is it means that the fighters, which are working in the realm of dealing hit point damage, and the wizards, who might be dropping instant death spells, are actually working together. Part of the problem with instant death spells used to be, the fighters are wearing down the hit points, and then suddenly, the wizard casts, death spell or disintegrate spell on the monster, and you go, okay, so me fighting this thing did nothing. Like, it didn't matter because the creature had, whether a creature had 1,000 hit points or 1 hit point, the death spell just kills it. No, what this does is this aligns the goals of the damage dealers along with the people who are, trying to instantly kill the creature. Now, I understand we don't really have instant kill spells anymore, but my point was, for a game that did have instant kill spells, this was a cool way to allow those spells to still function and still feel really powerful. When a wizard just went, and I know this because when now the Colossal Red Dragon is 1,000 points, by the way. The first one that came out, which it's hard to probably read here, Gargantuan Black Dragon. It was only 500 points, and it had 600 hit points and 6 activations around. So when these things first came out, though, there was whole tournaments set around them. So everybody was playing them, and they were really fun. And I could tell you that, like, when a wizard, I think it was like Elemenster, I was playing against a warband that had, like, Elemenster. And when Elemenster started off the fight with a snap of his finger and hit my dragon with a Disintegrate, and it took 100 damage and was down in activation just like that, it still felt really cool. But it also wasn't like, so it was like, wow, the wizard got this really awesome moment. But it wasn't also like, okay, the thing's dead and we're moving on. Which might be fine for a simulationist type game, but it's obviously not fine for a more gamist type game, which again, was one of our, going all the way back to the beginning of this chat, that was one of our presuppositions, that we like games, we want to embrace that sort of video game feel. So, Colossal Red Dragon, Indomitable, something that would kill it, instead deals 100 hit points. We like this because the hit points represent activations. Furthermore, you'll see here at the bottom, this is the other thing that this deal dealt with. At the bottom is a variety of actions. These are all the actions that the creature can take in one combat turn, or, you know, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. Meaning, you could think about it if you had like, you know, little glass beads or stones or markers that you would cover up. Most people would keep this thing in like a dry erase sleeve, and you would mark off these actions as you took them throughout the round. So even though you had 8 activations with this bad boy, you couldn't bite, 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 because bite was your best attack. Look at this, plus 28 to hit. My face is in the way. But it's, you know, plus 28 to hit and it does 50 damage. So the bite attack is your best attack. So why wouldn't I just use bite every time it's my turn? Well, because look, I can only use bite once per turn. Let me slide this over then. There we go. So I can only use bite once per turn. So I might definitely lead off with a bite, but now my other 7 activations for the turn, I have to use other things. And so finally, when we get to the end of the round, I would erase all these marks, and now at the start of next turn, I could suddenly bite again. It's the same thing with, you know, obviously these creatures have, in order to keep them dynamic, a lot of its activations involve it moving and doing something. But like bite, for example, is on its own. So you can't move and bite. There is no move and bite. And after a while, after you use up a bunch of your movement options, you can't move with every turn. You can't tail slap with every turn, and you can't breath weapon with every turn. And of course, breath weapon is still limited to 3 times per fight. You can see it here. Now, they didn't have recharge in miniatures, but like you would have in 4th edition or in Pathfinder 2. All right. So that, in my opinion, solves a lot of issues because it gives this sense of progression. And when you combine it, now this is from 3rd edition, but when you combine it with cool reactions like Bloodied or other things like that from 4th edition, I think you could end up with a really, really cool solo monster. And to kind of bring this all back, in Pathfinder 2, when the Knights of Last Call, at the end of Burnt Offerings, fought Nualia, the wayward Aasimar who had dedicated her life to servicing Lamashtu, and had become, in the book, the 3rd edition book, was basically like a fighter-cleric hybrid NPC. Instead of making her a party level +3 or party level +4 NPC, what I did is I took the stats for party level +1, which is 60 XP, and I essentially gave her the stats of a creature that was 1 level higher than the party. So the AC was a little bit higher. The attack roll was a little bit higher. And then I gave her 2 sets of actions in the initiative. On one of her actions, it was sort of Nualia, the matron of Lamashtu, and she would cast spells. And on her other activation, she would be more melee focused. So it's not like she could go spell, and it wasn't like she could go attack. It was almost like it was 2 creatures in one body. But what I did, and I gave her double the hit points, by the way, of a PL +1 monster. But when the party reduced her to half hit points, I essentially killed both those versions of monsters and replaced her with something that was a new monster.
GM Scott
All right?
$25. Just popped in to ask if this is 5e compatible. Can't stay. Work dealing.
GM Scott, thank you. Thank you for this. Thank you for the tip. And yes, I think this is 5e compatible because I think you should absolutely could and would and should use this for 5th edition. But thank you very much for the tip, GM Scott. That was very generous of you. And I hate to hear that you're working so late, but you know, hopefully we'll get you on here soon. So in Nualia's case, the party had this sense of progression because now suddenly she was going twice per round. Okay. And she was casting spells and being a combatant. And then halfway through the fight, that monster died and she like screamed and raged, and it was a bloodied moment. It was literally a bloody moment. She was at 50% hit point and she basically cursed them for being cowards, and she called upon Lamashtu and she brought in the rage into her soul. And what I essentially did at that point, more or less, is kind of get rid of the spellcaster template, slap the elite template on her to basically make her a PL +2 monster, but with the hit points of a PL +1 monster because she was at half hit points. And then we've played out the rest of the fight with her only having one activation per turn, but it feeling like it was more heavy hitting. And the party knowing, okay, we know exactly that she's at half hit points. So it kind of upped the danger, but it was very, very, very kind of clutch because her hit points were already so much lower. And they felt like, wow, this was kind of a win though, because she was going twice around. She was casting spells. I think she had confused Escanor. She had cast a harm spell that really rippled out and hurt everybody in the party for like 20 or 30. Or no, she was going to cast a harm spell. And Gore, I think, not Escanor, Gore got a critical hit on his attack of opportunity and disrupted it. My point is, it felt like a win. And more importantly, rather than slog through hundreds of hit points or whatever she had, 200 hit points, it felt cool and it felt like it was a win. So going all the way back to what Self-Confessed Cynic has said here. Now the basics are laid out. What do we want to achieve with good boss design, and what does the rule set need to do? Well, what it needs to do is the boss needs to feel dynamic. It needs to go more than once around. Now, whether we achieve that through extra actions or reactions or legendary actions, as 5th edition uses, that's debatable, and we can certainly have that debate. But more importantly, I think that the boss or the creature needs a form of progression. And where I think reactions suffer is with the progression element. Because one of the things that is true of Pathfinder 2, in my opinion, having seen it play out many times now, is if I take a monster, which is the party's level, and I use 3 of those monsters, okay, then that's 120 XP fight. That's a severe fight. But I could also take a foe, which is 3 levels higher than the party, and that creature is worth 120 XP, and that is a severe fight. So on the math, on paper, you have 1 creature, 3 levels higher than the party. That's a severe fight. You have 3 creatures, the same level as the party. That's a severe fight. The problem with those 2 fights are, in this fight and this fight, this monster that is 3 levels higher than the party will be just as hard to hit, just as doing much damage, just as a pain in the ass, just with the same powerful magic, just with the same high saves, all the way down until it breathes its last hit point. And it's gone. Whereas when you're fighting the 3 monsters over here, as the fight is going on, it is probably likely, especially if you use a little bit of smart tactics, that you are going to kill one of those creatures. And at that point, if you looked at the fight objectively, you would say, okay, now it's not a severe fight. Now this is actually a moderate fight because there's only 2 of them left. We feel like we are gaining escalation, like we are gaining momentum. We are conquering this. There is this, not this feeling of bleakness, which comes with, man, we have hit this creature. We have done over 100 damage, 200 damage to this creature. But fundamentally, mechanically, the encounter hasn't changed at all. Whereas when you fight just 3 monsters, you kill the first one, suddenly the fight's not that bad. Hell, you kill that second one, now the fight's kind of a joke. It's almost like a cleanup mode. So, but the game says that those are both severe fights. So, you know, I wonder how, in my personal opinion, I don't think they're the same. So Shootout 2 manual from software does bosses too. Self-confessed cynic, why don't you explain to us what the hell shout out to Manuel. Oh, from shout out to Manuel. From software does bosses right. Okay, we're talking about Manuel, who said, Derek figured out how to get your Dark Souls fight into Pathfinder 2. Okay. Yes, self-confessed cynic is a Elden Ring Dark Souls fan. Now again, let me be clear about something here. My favorite kind of boss fight is one where you come in and the boss monster's all cocky, and then I cast Disintegrate and it fails to save and it's just dead instantly. Because that's just hilarious. Okay, so let's be clear about something. Okay, that but I also like miniatures games. I like tactical games, and I like the element which Pathfinder 2 leans into, which is combining all these things. Okay, so what are our goals? Our goals are to give the creature dynamic ability and having the ability to move, attack, and affect a variety of characters and a variety of effects throughout a combat round to make it so that the party can't just ignore it and just say, okay, it went, now we can just do our thing. Secondly, we want the abilities of the Moss to be powerful, but not so powerful that the party this is my personal feeling. I can promise you, I've seen it. The math works in Pathfinder 2, but I find it a little depressing and despondent when I know that the creature
Finbar
is
fully tipped $5. What are your thoughts on layer actions as a component of the boss fight? I've had good luck making encounters more interesting by having the environment get involved, such as a sandstorm picking up, flame geysers becoming more intense, etc.
Okay, so great tip from Finbar. Finbar, I will say, I do think that is a fantastic way to handle and to increase the dynamicism of the fight. And I don't do it as much as a GM, but my DM, who DMs for me, Aaron Smith, William Brandis in the chat, he does this all the time. He plays a lot more MMOs than me, and he creates a lot of these sort of environmental effects or actions. In Pathfinder 2 terms, you could use a complex hazard and add it to your fight. I do want to touch on something, though, here, and this is what is really important, okay? Because what you're describing, Finbar, adds a lot of what I will call complexity to the fight. And the thing that we have to be careful of, that we have to be worried about, is the risk in an RPG or a video game is that we are going to encounter something and it's going to do something and we're not going to be ready for it and we're going to die. And it might not even be unfair. It might not even be a gotcha. Like a truly just like, what? It can do that? But you just didn't know that the creature had some ability and you made a bunch of complete tactical mistakes and errors because you had no idea what was going on. And then you die. And when this happens in a video game, or this happens in an MMORPG, you respawn and you fight the creature or the boss again. And maybe you die again. And then you fight it a third time or fourth time or whatever, and you beat it. Now, a lot of these games nowadays, especially these really tough games, part of their reward for playing the game is they make these things really tough. And they really reward you for having to play it multiple times and really develop your skill set. And then finally, when you do beat it, you enjoy it. But, it's we only have so many rounds in one of these fights. And we only have so much information that we can tell to the party members. I mean, the last time I was playing World of Warcraft was back in Cataclysm and Mists of Pandaria. And when you went into a dungeon, there was literally an option in your menu bar that would show you what the boss did and what its different moves were. And, okay, it'll start to create tornadoes and you need to, stack onto the pillars, or otherwise the tornadoes will throw you to the side. All these things. And so like the game was basically telling you, this is how you go and beat this boss. And that was in a game where if you died, nothing really bad happened, other than maybe people get upset with the game and they quit the subscription. But in a game like D&D or a game like Pathfinder 2, if you overly complicate the fight, or if you do not make it very clear what this creature is capable of doing, or what the environment is capable of doing, or what the hell is even going on, you run the risk that your party members won't know what to do. And they don't have a lot of time to figure that out. And it is probably the hardest thing for me to deal with in these games. I talked about this in our Battle Zoo Bestiary product review, but don't get me wrong. I like more interesting monsters. I like complex monsters. I don't like a lot of the 5th edition monsters because they're just buckets of hit points. There's a couple PF2 monsters that are just bags of hit points, to be clear. Not as many, but there's a few. But 5th edition has a lot of them. And don't get me wrong, those monsters are boring. But I also worry that when a monster gets to be too complex, and the example I gave in the Battle Zoo Bestiary was the Skeletal Monstrosity. Here is a creature that has bone marrow drinking, and you get grabbed, and then you're like, oh, okay, this creature grabbed me. And then it starts sucking out your bone marrow and healing itself. And you're like, okay, I didn't even really think about or know or plan that I could do this, but okay, it's a big, dumb skeletal creature. All right, we'll move at distance. Okay, well, it can fling its ribs at you as a ranged attack. And you're like, okay, I guess let's close in and kill it. Oh, okay, well, it dies, it blows up. It's just one ability after another ability after another ability, and you go, there's no way that the players are possibly going to know this. And if you're making this fight challenging, they may not survive it. And if they don't survive it in TTRPGs, traditionally, you don't just get to respawn and try it again. So that's the danger with sort of overcomplicating these monsters, is that it's a common error where the GM looks at the situation and says, oh, this makes perfect sense to me. I can imagine how the party will do this, and then they'll do this. But you are making all of these presumptions with complete and accurate knowledge. You know exactly what the creature is going to be doing, and you know exactly how you would counterplay it because you wrote the creature. So I think we also have to appreciate that if we go too complex, we can actually ruin the fight. Last week, I was considering a way to create boss fights with very large creatures from the Dragon's Dogma. In my opinion, splitting the large creature up into weaker parts works the best. Total Entropy, I did that once in 4th edition, and then the party showed me the error of my ways by using AoEs to attack all of the parts of the creature simultaneously, which was, to say the least, a little bit awkward. I use the map so the players have to pay attention to the elements of the map to play more tactically. That's fine. I mean, I agree with you. I think using environmental effects, layer effects, hazard type effects, I think are very, very cool. Don't get me wrong. Soul World does this. It calls them segments and enables you to do stuff like destroy the dragon's wings to turn off those attacks in flight, etc. I gave my players bloody reactions after they went through hellish training so I could make sense in Pathfinder for the enemies to have them. Nice. That's pretty awesome. Right. Splitting up a monster only works if it could take one OA packet or if the damage is divided amongst the parts. Right. There was a very famous monster, high level, end of 4th edition. 4th edition went to 30th level, by the way. It was like a level 27 monster, and it was like this massive thing. And then they just AoE'd it down. It was pretty rough. So is there a benchmark for complexity that you use? Anything that's not a spellcaster. Let me try to think. I'm trying to think of early game monsters that I think are pretty good. Believe it or not, I like something like on the lower end, but it's still good. Like something like the zombie is actually a pretty cool monster because fundamentally it moves, it attacks. Oh, it's slow 2 or slow 1, but we understand that it's a zombie. So of course it's slowed 1. It makes sense that it would be. And then the zombie sets up this thing. It's like a cool story in the thing of a zombie, which is if a zombie only has 2 actions, moves up to you and attacks you, you're like, okay, that's pretty scary. But if you engage with a zombie or you're surrounded by zombies and they can use both of their actions, then they can hit you. And then with their second action, they can grab you. And I think we all understand from like a zombie storyline that like being grabbed by the zombie is like scary. That's like the horror movie. Like that's the scary moment. And then you have that one turn to try to escape from the zombie's grab, right? And if you don't, then the zombie gets to use that really powerful jaw attack. And it's very dangerous and very powerful. And, if you were using some sort of zombie disease, that would be the time to try to inflict it upon players. And it's cool because all the elements of it, Mark Rosewater, who is the lead designer for Magic the Gathering, calls this resonance. And he doesn't mean like Pathfinder 2 resonance. When he talks about game mechanics that you don't really have to explain because they touch on something that culturally or just realistically makes sense. I thought I saw something up ahead. Somebody said something about tentacles. Oh, okay. They were talking about creating a larger creature and splitting up into things. But like, if I make a creature and it has a bunch of cool tentacles, like, I think we understand, okay, those things could probably grab me. They could probably squeeze me, right? Like, we get that this creature is going to be a grabbing, squeezing monster. And so that resonates with us. And so when it does that thing, we may not 100% understand what it does, but we're not surprised by it when it does happen. So, vampire spawn are pretty cool for the 2 for the same reason. Okay. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure I know what vampire spawn do, but that sounds reasonable. All right. So we laid out the basics and the goals. Let's design this boosh. System design, go, go, go. Perhaps 2 versions, system version 1 and maybe reaction version to make Smith happy. I think a boosh might be a bitch, but, all right. So, hold on a second here. Okay, nice. All right. Okay, so we have it's me trying to not make Derek sweat. All right, I like sweat better. All right, I do too. All right, so self-confessed cynic here wants us to try to create 2 versions, system version 1 and maybe a reaction version. Okay, so this is Pathfinder 2E solo boss system version 1.0. All right, so first things first, we're gonna discuss we will spitball something and then we'll let the chat sort of weigh in here on what we think about it. Okay, first things first. And again, we could probably ratchet up the complexity level of this, but we understand that fundamentally, if we're fighting a boss, it's probably going to be a severe or an extreme fight. So I'm gonna make a bold statement here. Okay, I'm sorry, what? Don't forget to show the Pathfinder 2E monster creation guidelines. Okay, so now Joey says extreme always, but I'm actually gonna go with extreme. Self-confessed cynic with another super chat. What does he say here? I love this idea for a design system live stream. This is awesome. More, please. Well, listen, as long as the tips and the super chats keep coming, we'll keep doing more of these. So going back to what I said before, in Pathfinder 2, a single creature actually has some advantages because its stats are so high. But a single creature also has some disadvantages. And specifically, it can't flank, it can't be multiple threats, it can't be threatening multiple characters at the same time. And so I think we can get away with essentially thinking of this as an extreme fight. But I don't think it's going to play out or feel the same way that in normal Pathfinder, right, would be a power level, would be one monster at power level +4. But if we think about an extreme fight as being 160 XP, so then we could think about the baseline stats, okay? And again, I want to try to use as much as we have from Pathfinder 2. So to make an extreme fight, we have two options. We could use 4x party level monsters, that's 40 XP times 4, or we could use 3x power level +1 monsters, and that's 60 XP times 3. No, that's 180. All right, well, that's too much. Well, we'll it looks like we're going to have to use this, but maybe we could play around with this. Maybe this isn't that much. I was thinking that there was a way to get 3, but no, you have to go 160, 120. But we might still be interested in this. Fundamentally, though, Pathfinder 2 is based around the idea of 4 PCs. So I like the idea of using this option because this is going to give us, Total Entropy says 2x PL1, PL1. They should get good if they can't beat it. We'll see. It's possible that because of the restrictions of being one character, we might be able to get away with using this 3x PL1. Now, by the way, the stream has become completely unintelligible as we start talking. we're like PL 3x PL1 PL +1 at 60 XP x3. So now it's like if you don't know what we're talking about, I'm sorry, I apologize. This is the part. Well, I'll put a timestamp and say from here on out, it's just Pathfinder 2 system nonsense. I think we can all agree that a creature hitting this hard isn't very exciting. All right, so I'm gonna say we're actually gonna try this and see where we go with this for this. So fundamentally, we would have and what is that? What does PL +1 mean? Well, PL +1 means that the creature will probably be hitting on, maybe like an 8 or higher. It's the party will be hitting on like a 12 or 13, right? Like that's kind of roughly what we mean as well. Patrick, the 2 PL +2 is interesting, but it's starting to get close to that problem of the monster stats and ACs being too high. I personally feel like, when a monster is hitting on like a 7 to 8 and the PCs are hitting on like a 12 or 13, that feels appropriate. But we'll get into some of this dynamics in a little bit. So on a fundamental basis, if we use this action, and we're going to come across the first major problem, which, to be clear, I have an idea for, but I don't actually know if this is a real solution, and we may need to scrap the idea right here, which is we could think of this creature as having 3 sets. Now, the Etten, so this is the first big thing that we need to do. The Etten, or 3x PL +1, would get 3x = 3 = 9 actions, right? So we could either do that as the creature gets 3 initiatives of 3 actions each. That's one option. The other concept, though, is the creature more interesting when it has less actions on its turn. So again, using templating here, we know that the Etten gets 2 initiative counts of 2 and 2. My concern is that normally you have your 3 actions to do everything that you need to do in a turn. But if you give a creature 2 actions on a turn, or 3 actions, I should say, on a turn, that's usually going to be enough time for it to either do one of 2 things. And what we can think about the creature as having is it can have 1 action, move, like things like moves and basic strikes. Okay. Well, total entropy, we're going to get to this in a second, because one of the things that's very important about this total entropy is how slow would work for this creature. Okay. Because the way I'm thinking about this creature is, if this creature gets 9 actions per combat turn or per combat round, okay, then if you slow it, it gets 8. Not slowed 1 for each of its turns. We have to stop thinking of it as, think of it as having 1 turn that has 9 actions, but after 3 actions, the creature is forced to delay. Does that make sense? Like, that's the way that we should think about it, is the creature still just kind of gets 1 turn, but at the start of its turn, it gets 9 actions. It takes some number of them, and then it ends its turn, it delays, and then it picks up its turn again. It's forced to delay, right? It doesn't, so if it gets slowed or stunned, it doesn't necessarily lose all of its things. Exactly, total entropy. It wouldn't take persistent damage 3 times or 4 times in a round. It would take it once at the end of the round, or whenever it takes its final sets of actions or things of that nature, right? We need to come up with a way to sort of break this down. Because otherwise we run into this problem where the creature is actually overly penalized for being 1 creature. We don't want that to be the case. So, you know, from a strict mechanical perspective, you could really honestly say that the creature, Anthony says, I think frightened or similar conditions should decrement only once per round instead of boss turn. Well, that is an interesting question. And Anthony, this actually brings up the biggest problem, okay? It's the problem that we have to solve. Otherwise, this whole thing doesn't matter, okay? Let's say we use traditional, okay, well, just for purposes here, we'll make this guy a dragon, because that's what we've been talking about, right? So this is Red Dragon, okay? So the Red Dragon goes, and he gets 3 turns. 3 gets to go 3 times per combat round. So he gets 3 actions here. Then the fighter goes. Then, well, probably not. Well, the fighter's got good initiative. Then the Red Dragon goes again. Then the cleric. Then the wizard, or then the rogue. Oh, there we go. I'm being too particular here. The rogue. Then the Red Dragon. And then the wizard. Okay. So that is what our initiative order looks like. Okay. That's great. Until the fighter is going to try to attack this creature, but says, hey, you know, I'll flank with you, rogue, but I might as well just delay, because that way the rogue and I can both get the benefit for being flat-footed, and we'd like this creature to be -2 AC. So he delays, and now it's then it's the wizard, and the wizard goes, well, I was going to cast fear, but then the dragon goes twice. It's definitely going to lose its fear. I'll just delay until it's here, and now your fight looks like this. Okay? The standard initiative, delaying and readying, don't work in this kind of system. Keep in mind that the Etten monster itself is not allowed to delay. So that solves the monster issue. But what it doesn't solve is the PC issue. Ironically, this is a case where 5th edition has an advantage, because in 5th edition, you cannot delay and you cannot ready. Or you can't delay. You can't change your initiative. And in D&D miniatures, you didn't have this problem because it was always they go, you go, or you go, they go, you go, they go, you go. It was always a back and forth. And so we need two options. There's two options. Option number one, I can see a lot of people in chat here. Let's see here. All right. Also, players specifying when initiative set, they're debuffing. I like a normal turn, but one action after each PC from a limited set of actions. That is possible, but I mean, part of what I like about doing this is I like that the creature gets just sort of a normal turn, and we can have a little bit more fun with it, and we'll kind of talk about that in a second. Treat the main initiative roll as its true round for turnovers. That's not an options. So does the map apply to the 9 actions? Absolutely not. Now we're trying to fix Alchemist. Sorry, I'm just catching up here. I think you enforce the ordering by forcing it to delay. The second one always goes after 1 or 2 PCs. Maybe reset the boss's initiative each round. I think the boss having 9 actions in a row is undesirable. They may not want to do that. That is possible. And they could definitely just delay again. Team-based initiative doesn't feel right. I prefer alternate initiative and just treat divas by round. So there's a couple of options about this. One way that we can do this is, and again, I understand that we're paying complexity here. One way that we can do this is that the initiative for the creature is essentially set, that it would just go. The other option, which is a little bit stranger, is we allow the party members to do this if they wish, but we create a disincentive, and we create some kind of mechanic, and I don't know what we would call it, but we would call it like momentum or something, okay? And basically, the way it would work is that every time the red dragon goes or something, the momentum goes up and it becomes stronger. Okay, bonus to a hit. Basically, when the red dragon takes an action, the momentum goes up, and Dylan said reverse map. Yes, think of this as reverse map. Okay, and it gets stronger, okay? Then, when it takes damage or fails a save, okay, then either it goes down or it resets to 0, depending on what we want to do. But basically what this does is it creates a sense of urgency in the party members, because if they just leave this creature alone, it is just going to sort of ramp up. And if they create this situation where the creature can go and take all 9 actions in a turn, okay, then by the time it gets to this turn, the creature is going to be devastatingly powerful. And they can play this game if they want to, if they think the advantage is to do this. Whereas I would argue that by creating this incentive, you basically make it so that the party goes, no, we need to be interrupting this creature's attack. We can't let it get the momentum. We need to keep this creature on its toes. If we just let it sit there and do its thing, okay, we're going to get destroyed. We're going to get trounced. We have to keep this thing constantly under the, our aim, under our target fire. And it becomes a kind of mini puzzle, which is like, hey, we really need to hit. Now, keep in mind, this is not PL +4 monster that you need a 16 or 17 to hit. It's a creature that, you're going to be hitting on a 10 or 11 or 12 without any buffs. And so if you could put a flat-footed or something on it, suddenly you are hitting the creature on a 10 or a 9 if you have like maybe 2 sets of buffs. So it is more reasonable to assume that the party is actually going to be able to hit. So those are kind of my thoughts. Self-confessed cynic says, oh snap, momentum, this is spicy. Now, am I fully aware that, for something like this to be effective, this has to be communicated to the party members. You can't surprise them with this. This has to be something that just solo monsters become part of your game, and this is something that they can do, and party members know that. And so when they go in to fight these things, they know, okay, we need to be thinking about how do we disrupt this creature. I think alternating initiative is friendlier. Momentum could punish bad play too much. I love momentum, though. Maybe momentum plus resetting initiative roundly. Momentum plus resetting the initiative each round. Yes. I mean, that is possible. Do you let them spend a hero point or something to reroll the initiative once they realize momentum is trashing them? Well, keep in mind, Dylan, a couple of things. Number one, this creature is not going to be power level +4. Secondly, if you want to do initiative and you want to do it the complete old-fashioned way, okay, you create MIP, multiple initiative penalty. So this creature would roll initiative, and then it would either roll initiative again at -5, or you would just roll its initiative, and then you would take off 5, 10, 15, and those would be its initiative orders, as if it had rolled 5 less, 10 less, et cetera, et cetera. Alternatively, I think we saw this before, you could, if it has 3 sets of initiatives, you just treat the first initiative as if it rolled a 15. The second initiative is if it...
Push tipped $25.
Hey, CMB, good to see you. Good to see you, buddy. Welcome. Thank you for the tip. Very generous. Appreciate it. Good to see you. Happy that you're here. We're talking about solos. So yeah, 50. You treat it like the boss rolled a 15, a 10, and a 5. And that's just its initiative, right? And it just goes into that respect. If you were going with the 4 action boss, 4 sets of actions turns per round. If it was like a slow boss, you maybe go treat it like it was like a 5, 10, 15, and a 1 or a 0. And if it was more of like a quick skirmishy, speedy boss, you would treat it like it rolled a 20, 15, 10, 5. But ultimately, I think it is more fun if you use sort of this alternating initiative, for sure. Because remember, we want things to matter, but we also don't want them to be too powerful that they destroy the point of the game. So consider something like Frighten. Well, if this was actually 3 separate monsters, then when you frightened the monster, one set of its attacks would be affected by Frightened, and then the effect would end. Well, the same thing is true for this creature. If you cast Frighten 1 on this, and it gets 9 actions worth of its turn frightened, okay, that is overwhelmingly too powerful, because that's way more mileage than you would have ever gotten out of a single Frightened effect, as you would against a normal creature. So I think what you have to do is you have to treat certain effects as ending at the end of the creature's turn, and you have to treat other effects like multiple attack penalty as resetting at the end of each of the creature's round, versus some effects ending at the end of each creature's turn. And certainly there is a complication to this that you do need to make sure that your players are aware of, because otherwise it's just going to be very, very confusing for them, and they're going to feel punished for not understanding. Let me see here what we got here. Other options, instead of making a penalty, make it a buff for the players to submit their turn. Yes. So that is a definite option. I don't know how you would do that, though. MIP attack. Yeah, the PCs would definitely need to know about this. But again, this becomes a part of the game. Like the same way that, the same way that we know how catch and edge works, and the same way that we know that arrest a fall, the same way that we know how trip works, or how the universal monster ability grab works, right? We just accept these things as being part of the game world that we're playing in. Anthony, you should worry about adding in all this complexity. The current system is very it's still pretty complex, but we are making this combat more deep by adding a certain level of complexity. But fundamentally, what I want to get to is something where let's just try this. Let's just say, let's go here. We'll do the simplest version of this. All right. We'll just do the simplest version of this. The monster rolls initiative. And this is again against a party of we're going to actually say here, we're going to say a party of 4 players. The monster rolls initiative. If it rolls greater than the players, the highest player, okay, then it's going to go monster. God damn, I can't even type. Monster, PC, monster, PC, monster, PC, PC. If it rolls less than the highest player, then it looks like that. Now how we actually achieve this, whether through, we just make that a rule, or the monster automatically delays or something, again, we'll try to make this as simple as possible to get to the net result that we want. Okay. So we've got a creature and it's going to have standard hit points. Let's just pick something here. So a level 7 party. So we're talking about taking a creature that is 3 equivalents of party level 1. So this is a level 8 monster. Okay. So if we go over to Archives of Nethys, all right. And we come down here, and we can see that, there we go. A level 8 monster has between 131 and 139 hit points, right? So let's just say 135 hit points. Okay. So in this case, though, we're going to X that by 3 because we are using this idea that this creature has a lower hit points, or lower armor class, lower defenses. So that's 505 hit points. All right. But every time this creature takes 135 hit points of damage, okay, it is going to lose one of these actions until eventually it is left with just a single set of combat actions, just like we would have seen in a normal fight. But the point is, the party is going to get a sense of progression. And yes, the creature has a lot of hit points, but they are going to be hitting this thing on, 11s and 12s and 13s. And if they use a couple buffs, if they put themselves in a strong position, they might be hitting on, 8s and 9s and 10s, actually critting. So it's not as crazy as it seems, but it does mean that there's a lot more hit points for the party to chew through, which could feel like it could run into the 5th edition problem, but where you have a lot of hit points. But consider a couple of followings. Number 1, there's going to be a sense of progression. This creature is either it's not only going to be losing actions as the fight goes on, leading to a sense of achievement, but also we could put in reactions. We can bring back things like bloodied, so that as the creature loses actions, then it gains extra abilities. Patrick asks, how does this really differ from just fighting 4 separate enemies other than flavor? Patrick, fundamentally, not a lot. I mean, certainly it is a different type of experience because you're concentrating on a single creature, but also because it allows you to it's not just about the stats, it's also about the abilities that you give this creature. You want this creature to have the ability to do big, expansive, powerful attacks, right? You don't want it to just feel like it's a normal monster. And this gives you a little bit more leeway to do this. And we'll talk about this in a second, actually, as we get around to it, because I think this is what actually makes the situation kind of cool. And I also agree with what Self-Confessed Cynic here says. Flavor shouldn't be underestimated. You can have different forms on each action loss. You have a lot of hit points, but the monster is moving around more. Exactly. I think you should also add more stuff for the monster to do. Exactly. So one of the things that we want to do here is similar to, so we know that this creature has essentially 9 actions per turn. Hello. Wow. David Lemuel. David Lemuli. Hey, David. Welcome. Love this conversation. Reminds me of legendary actions. Thank you for that extremely, extremely, extremely generous, very generous. You get a HTS. That's a very generous tip. Thank you very, very much. You get a strong one too.
I am strong.
Yeah, very, very, very good. Maybe 2 of those. Maybe 2 of those.
I am strong.
All right, thank you. That was very awesome. Thank you. Big tip. Of course, I think this live design stream is definitely a hit. Well, it's definitely an interesting thing. I mean, again, these things aren't easy, right? Like, you can't just throw these things together. And I should also note, by the way, if you're not part of this, I promise you this conversation is going to be going on for a long time. This is just the start of it. We're going to be talking about this in our Discord. If you want to be part of that, go ahead and join the Patreon. We have a $3 level Squire, which will get you into the Discord. But if you want any of the extra goodies, the behind-the-scenes stuff, you want to check out Northern Reaches, our Pathfinder 2 mega game, which is like an MMO meets Western Marches meets Pathfinder 2. We have 60 or 70 players all playing Pathfinder 2 simultaneously. That's pretty cool. You get that at the $5 night level. And we have some other higher tiers, which are great if you want to be a participant of that as well. So it's definitely a fun time. We're going to keep this going. And I would be remiss without saying something here. Oh, Overlord. Oh my gosh. Should have known it was you. You know, Overlord, we were just talking about you and we were like, where has Overlord been? Because you came into the server, you were active for a few weeks and you made such a huge impact with your gamer lifestyle. This guy, folks, has the most incredible gaming setup you will ever see in your life. This man built himself a literal separate house on his property, basically to be his gamer den. Now he's got a nice piece of property out in the, off of the cut, and he just builds this incredible, amazing. Everything in it is gamer themed, gorgeous bookshelves. It made everybody in our Patreon just stop and just drool and like reconsider their life goals because of how amazing and incredible this design was. So it's very, 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 very cool. Yeah, it's incredible house, and beautiful use of one's. Overlord, I believe, is semi-retired or quasi-retired, and just it's goals. It's just hashtag goals, and awesome to see you in here. Hopefully you'll get some time and regale us with some more tales and stories on the Discord sometime soon, sir. So definitely appreciate it. Love to hear from you. Love to hear it. Denny the Many. Hey, Denny. Good to see you. Long time no see. Love the stream as always. Hope all is well. Appreciate it. Appreciate you. Thank you so much. You guys really, really, really appreciate everything. Appreciate everything. Denny the boss. All right. So awesome. So, again, I don't want to go off on too much of a rant here because it's already 9 o'clock. So unfortunately, this conversation will probably have to go to the Discord here eventually. But 13th Age, which is a D20 based game, it kind of takes elements from 4th edition and it takes elements from 3rd edition. It has something in the game called the escalation die, and the escalation die is a D6. And the way this works is each turn
Brian
the
Haley
D6.
tipped $7.79.
Hey.
Will you release Colk's first homebrew boss monster?
Yes, I will definitely do that. We'll definitely be releasing that. And you know what I was going to say is that this type of thing that we're doing here is exactly the type of thing that I want my community to be a part of. One of our goals is we want to eventually get to the point where our Patreon is able to release Pathfinder 2 content. Some of you may know that I have been on Roll for Combat on their stream a couple times here, more than a couple times, and I've gotten a really good chance to get to know, Roll for Combat's crew, Mark and Steven, amazing people, and they're just really, really cool. Well, the thing is, they've really inspired me with, they've done Battle Zoo Bestiary, and they really have shown me the value of getting some of your ideas out there. They've been a tremendous resource. Steven's incredible. He and I are actually going to be meeting up at Origins, and we're going to talk shop, and it's going to be really, really fun. Really excited about it. But one of the things I'd love to do with my Patreon is use it as a platform to give people awesome Pathfinder 2 ideas. Ideas, no offense, they're just too crazy and too out there to really ever be mass marketable, publishable. Something that we really couldn't do on Kickstarter. But it is something that we could release as part of our Patreon. And, I'm a smart guy. I've been playing this game for a long time. But you are very good at this game too. That's why you're here. And the folks that I've been able to meet with and talk with on the Patreon Discord and create and develop some of the best technically minded people I've ever seen. And I'd love the opportunity to work with people like you and on the Patreon, create some published content, throw people a couple bucks for getting their name on a product. This isn't volunteer work. And I'd love to be able to create and develop systems like this, or who knows what other systems. And, get some published content out there. And who knows, maybe one day we all team up, we work together, and we put out a big Kickstarter, and we have ourselves a little fun time. And everybody gets to make a little bit of money. So yeah, very, very cool. I'm really enjoying this process. I'm hopefully you are all as well. I understand that this is inherently a very limiting stream because it is very technical, but it is this. Kieran, well, we spent about an hour and a half sort of defining the problem, and then we have spent the last 40 minutes or so trying to understand how we can mechanicize that without creating any sort of problems. I missed a couple of things here. Self-confessed cynic says, "Nah, dog, this needs a live stream part 2. Do we need a live stream part 2? Well, I'm supposed to go live on Thursday. I'm supposed to go live on Thursday, but it was supposed to be spells, but I suppose it could be system design part 2. Just because I don't want to go crazy late tonight. So I do appreciate it. Hey, Dylan. Thank you, Dylan.
Dylan tipped $10. Please chalk up all of tonight's proceeds to the Make Smith cosplay tip goal that doesn't exist.
You guys want to see Smith cosplay? Listen, let me tell you something about Smith. I think you guys are going to be really surprised with Smith for Quest for the Frozen Flame. Okay, he's going to come in. He's going to come in real hard on that game. Okay. Do it instead of spell ratings. Who cares about a nerds? Dylan, thank you so much for that. And I'm sure I can get Smith to do some great stuff. Thanks for the great intro. Work had me busy, but now I'm back. That's great to hear, Overlord. We missed you, and like I said, you were active there for just a little bit, but you made a huge impact on the on the entire server. So you switch between ASR and this on alternating weeks. Yeah, Brutus. Part of the thing, Brutus, is going forward, this Tuesday slot is going to be for actual plays. Obviously, we're going to be doing Pathfinder 2 every other week, but my goal, once we get this Pathfinder 2 thing kicked off, is to use those other weeks on Tuesdays to play different games, right? To play Dungeon World, to play Monster Hearts, to play Legend of the Five Rings. So we may only get one live stream a week. So I may have to go to an additional live stream a week, and and or something. Maybe we'll do a Saturday night live stream or something, or a Sunday night live stream, or a real witching hour stuff that nobody hasn't really cares in. K Swisstack, that's funny that you mentioned that. Today was almost going to be a bring on the patrons roundtable. We just had this idea, again, self-confessed cynic Vin from our Patreon. He had this idea of bringing on some of our more active and engaged members when a conversation on the Discord seems like it's something that we should really be able to discuss. Just get everybody on a Zoom call, bring them in. I knew I was going to be really hectic today, so I didn't really have time to set it up. But going forward, I do think that's a great idea, and I think a lot easier. And I know some of these folks here, are on the Discord. And so it'll be easy to sort of find them, and maybe we can set this up in advance and get a Zoom call in and, really kind of bang this stuff out that way. So, yeah, Damien, I think that'd be really fun. I'd love to get you and Vin and some of the other heroes on for sure. And as well as, if we get some people who are particularly interested and eager to join, and even if they're not a hero, maybe don't invite me. I'm too much of an RPG noob. That's okay, Anthony. You're here to learn and participate, and there are no good ideas, only bad ideas. Okay, but again, I think we're going to start wrapping this up, unfortunately. But I think what I really want to sort of highlight here is that we need to figure out, and we can kind of maybe take this away as sort of homework. Okay, we got to figure out this initiative problem. Okay, I want an elegant solution to the initiative problem. Sorry, self-confessed cynic. It's 9:15. What time is it there? Oh, it's in the morning. It was a long day. But we it took a while to define the problem, and I needed to make sure everybody has defined the problem. But and maybe someone can answer me on this. Okay, is a creature being forced to delay? Does that work? So in other words, if you had a creature and at the start of its turn, so let's take a look at this initiative order here. Okay, if the monster receives 9 actions, but as part of its templating, as part of its text, after 3 actions, it delays. Does that eliminate the need for... Now, does that eliminate the need for these things? Does the delay text actually allow us to do what we want it to do? I don't think you can have taken actions and delay. Now, even the delay we can't really use because it won't let you use reactions when you are delaying. So we still might have to, and the trigger for delay is your turn begins. Yeah, exactly. Patrick, a creature being forced to delay kind of removes the player's ability to delay. Patrick, part of the problem is we want the players to not to delay. Okay. I love your channel, but I don't come from the Pathfinder content. Well, cool, Dan. Actually, Dan, one of the reasons I set up this new setup here, which I'm working on, kind of rebuilding my office, is so that I can make easier videos about other game systems. And I want to be able to produce a little bit more videos a month and get those out there. And these aren't going to be the, 1 hour mega slogs that Knights of the Last Call is known for, where we have, 3 or 4 people all talking over each other in sort of a fun but chaotic and disorganized mess. Instead, I want to take some ideas that I have, get them get them written down, have some bullet points, discuss it, get a point across succinctly, and get that content out. And that'll be a great way for me to be able to produce more content related to other games other than Pathfinder 2. But outside of that, I'm really excited to play some other games other than Pathfinder 2 because I like a lot of games other than Pathfinder 2. So, going back to this, Patrick. Yeah, we kind of want to get rid of the player's ability to delay, or we either eliminate it or we strongly disincentivize that. And that's where the momentum concept came from. But there was some concern that that might be too complex to an already additionally complex system. So Anthony, the problem is you can't delay is a free action, but you can only do it when your turn begins. So as written, we cannot just use boilerplate delay. We'd have to make some sort of custom rule. You can't, but if we're going to do a thing elegantly, we might be forced to go outside of Pathfinder bounds. That's fine, K-Swiss deck, but if we can stay within the game, let's do it. Right? That's all I'm trying to say. If we can stay within the game. Hey, Rope Mimic, thank you. Thank you, buddy. Rope Mimic has been... how long have you been a member of the Patreon, Rope Mimic? It feels like you've been a member for a very long time, but Rope Mimic is someone who joined us from the chats, came in, made a big splash on the Discord, and seems like you're in every conversation, Rope Mimic. So cheers to you, Rope Mimic, for really taking the Discord seriously. Appreciate it. Appreciate you and appreciate that tip. Thank you, Rope Mimic. That's very, very nice. I know. I think that delay should just be a rule and not try to make it happen naturally. That's fine. In my opinion, the creature should just act after the next player after it has taken its first turn. This eliminates the delay issue. But how do we express that mechanically? Like, how do we, you know what I mean? That's the problem. And how do we avoid, having the monster get all stacked up? Now, Matthew Brunn says ditch initiative entirely. Unfortunately, that is tough to do in Pathfinder 2 because it is something that players actually use and have invested into, and there are things that affect initiative, like rogues. So, like, you still want to sort of use initiative. We cannot get away from it entirely. That's true, Damien. That is true. We can give something, even though if it already has another name like crap. That's right. Boundaries breed creativity. I like K-Swiss Stack's statement here. I think maybe at first the boss's turns are set to enforce the players being between turns. They can delay if they want, but then momentum happens. Okay, that's interesting. What if you have a free action that triggers on PCs using delay? Yes, Rope Mimic, that sounds right. I think one thing that you could do is allow players to switch around their turns at the beginning of every round. Boss delay. Matthew, listen, I hate initiative. It's my least favorite thing in the game. Can't stand it. I would prefer just, if it's an old school game, I would prefer group-based initiative. But since we are playing a game with sort of back and forth activations, I would much rather prefer the D&D mini style of game where, you go, I go, you go, I go, you go, I go. But how you function in that within the context of the rest of the system, it's a little difficult for me to know. I kind of had an interesting idea here, and I'm going to end the stream after this. What if now this? Okay, so let me start off by saying something here, and then we'll kind of wrap up the stream. Which is, what if, well, no, all right, never mind. I'm not going to get into it. It's a whole separate idea. It's like expounding on an idea I had for initiative, and I just don't want to get into it. Patrick, that is a hell of idea. That would be really, really weird because, like, how do you handle multi-action things and stuff like that? It'd be kind of wonky. So, how about this? I don't know. Because, like, one thing that we could do, one idea that I have is, like, yeah, we definitely got some ideas for part 2. Because one of the other things I wanted to do with these actions is, Patrick, kind of brought this up, but K-Swistak here talked about a trait called Telegraph. And basically, outside of this, one thing that I really want this boss to be able to do within a round is basically what we all really wanted Magus's and meta magic feats to be able to do, right? We all talked, and then they definitely shut us down on that, right? And what I mean by is, as a wizard, or a sorcerer or something, I cast a spell, and then can I, use an action that says the next spell I cast gets this benefit, and I use it at the end of my turn, and then my turn ends, but then it goes all the way over to my initiative again, and then when my turn starts, I get the benefit. And they have said, no, you don't get that. No, you don't get that. One thing that I really want to be able to do with a boss that has initiatives like this, okay, is have it take actions that telegraph a very powerful attack or a very powerful defense, okay? And then a PC or two has a chance to interrupt or disrupt that action. This is kind of getting to the height of dynamicism, okay? And part of the way we solve the delaying issue is that it is in your interest to try to go between the monsters, so that if on this initiative count right here, okay, if it takes some action and it does some sort of, in our case, it's a red dragon, right? So maybe one of the actions it takes is like breathe deep. And Damien, you got it right there. The dragon starts breathing in deep. So it kind of goes. Now, the monster does that. Now, if the monster breath weapons, that breath weapon is extra devastating. It adds, knocked prone. It adds stunned or something to the breath weapon. But if before it can do a breath weapon, if the party can deal, a certain threshold of damage or inflict some sort of condition or something on the dragon, or, give it like a non-linear approach rather than just do damage, make it so that they have to kind of get creative and think of something else that they can do that maybe isn't just so straightforward. Maybe it's something that you don't do a lot in a combat. Like, like if a creature is like, putting its feet down and it's going to supercharge up. If you can shove it or forced movement it before its turn comes back around again, then that bonus action is disrupted, right? And you guys are exactly on my right page. I know the chat's a little bit delayed for me, but I'm seeing, Damien talking about breathing in deep. I'm seeing Brutus talk about shove. K-Swistek says finally a good use for fascination. Yeah, I mean, exactly, right? Like, and that's the kind of the key. Is we want these actions to not just be more excuses for it to do, strikes and strides and breath weapons and attacks. We want, we have all these extra actions now. Let's use them to create a more dynamic fight that the party feels like they can respond in kind and actually interact with this boss and have a series of sort of mini victories throughout the combat. Instead of having just one big victory at the end when you kill it, this is going to break the fight down into a series of mini victories. Each time the party deals, 130 hit points and the creature loses a set of actions. Cool, that's a victory. But even within a round, the creature breathes deep, preparing to unleash a mega breath weapon. But, someone is able to go in and, knock the beast prone or shove it or something, and that disrupts the breath. And the party's like, cool, that feels like a victory too. And as long as you can do that, the fight will never get stale because you're chaining together these mini moments. And then you have these sort of intermediate victory moments when the creature goes down a set of actions. And then finally, you have that final ultimate huzzah when the creature goes down for good. And ultimately what we hope that you have at the end of it is not only a fight that's memorable and entertaining, but one that was tactically challenging and required the party members to use a bunch of the cool abilities and things at their disposal, not just do damage as fast as you can, stack debuffs and conditions so that you can hit more often, because that's kind of what you do against a boss.
So that's kind of where we're, trying to go for this. And I want to kind of end here on something that our new friend Explosion said here. I did exactly this, including saying stuff like the boss raises his blade, collecting energy, and levels it at you. And it didn't get the greatest response because of what you talked about earlier, where PCs don't get to wipe and respawn. And there's very few turns in a fight for them to figure out the mechanic. Yes. We have to be transparent here, okay? This is like Dungeon World, okay? We can learn from our narrative indie games. Never speak your move. But when you describe something in the narrative, if that triggers a move, say what honesty demands. I'm using Dungeon World speak here. You don't have to make it so mechanical. But when I describe that the dragon, claws at a wizard and then hurls someone else away and then sort of buries his claws into the ground, the stone crumbling beneath his feet, and then he starts sucking in a deep breath. That's all fun and that's all cool and that's narrative. And then what I do, I talk to my players. I talk to my friends. Okay, I talk to you. And I say, I'm going to say what honesty demands. Guys, he is breathing in deep. He is supercharging his next breath weapon. Unless you can find a way to force him to move or knock him prone before his next breath weapon attack, he is going to do an powerful, furious breath weapon that not only will cause immense damage, but will also require a fortitude save, or you will be knocked prone or stunned or slowed or whatever by the force of the hurricane fury of his ultra mega breath. Cool. We're still playing a game. We're still describing things in a cool and flavorful way. We're not just throwing stats at each other. This creature isn't just going, I attack. No, it's a really cool moment. This dragon breathing deep, unleashing this mega attack. But I'm also talking in a language that is fair and balanced and one that we can all understand. And that means that the players know what's going on. And remember, the two parts that I always talk about that include players having agency is the players have to be able to, make decisions that matter, but they also have to be aware of what the consequences and the rewards for their actions are. And if you don't have those two things, then you don't have player agency. So I'm going to catch up with the chat, and then we'll probably start to take us out. So let's see what we have here in the chat. Disarm, because no one uses that. If you could fascinate it, it drops the effect. That's pretty cool. I like a lot of people are going in for disarm. That's so funny. How many people disarm? That's so great. That is so hilarious. How many people just said that? That is very funny. Cognazo, the elemental fiend of water from Final Fantasy IV, is exactly kind of Damien, the kind of effect that I'm thinking about as I say this. Okay. And by the way, if you want to go back and you want to watch my Nualia fight, I think it's episode 12 or 13 or 10 or 11. It's one of those. It's the final fight in Rise of the Runelords. You will see that she had an ability that she could cast. It was one action, and it would surround her with a crackling field of energy that gave her physical resist 10 to all damage, all damaging effects. But if she took spell damage, then that shield would collapse. Now, she could bring it back up again the next turn, but it was kind of a similar idea where she could take an action that would require the party members to sort of change their approach or do something different. And that kind of created this fun interaction of play. And that's kind of definitely what I kind of want to go for. If your momentum concept was an action the boss could do, it could be disruptive somehow. That would be cool. Patrick, I knew what we would get to this point, and I didn't want to confuse everybody. But one of the things I thought about when I came up with that momentum concept was that could even be something that a boss left to their own devices could just basically spend their turns kind of, gaining power as they sort of charge up. If you leave them alone, they're just going to supercharge the momentum and become almost unbeatable, right? All right, we are wrapping up here. We've got minutes, the things. I want to thank everybody for participating today. I want to thank everybody for the very generous super chats. I want to thank everybody for the very generous tips. We got a couple subs in here. Love to see it. And honestly, this was a lot of fun. And again, I really, you know, don't get it twisted, right? I love role-playing games. They are my life. If I complain or I rant a lot about a game, it's because that's what I do. You know, these games aren't perfect, and that bothers me, right? And it's not in my nature to just leave things alone. So I'm always trying to find ways to make something better. And, you know, Pathfinder 2 has what I consider to be an immaculate design. I don't love its implementation. I do not love its implementation. And I think that's where we all, you know, you and I can make this a lot better. Matthew, thanks for joining us tonight. Appreciate it. Thanks for the compliment. These are just as much y'all's insights as they are mine. Any way we can close out by listing the goals on screen and saying our homework for the week. I love this. I love that idea for these design streams. People can post their ideas in the comments and the Discord. Yeah, Vin is running this stream, Anthony. I love it. Yeah, okay. So, Damien, that is 100% right. If I hated a game, I would not talk about it. So, okay. Our goal, our main challenge of this is this. Okay, number one is... Hey, thanks.
Entropy tipped $8. Again? Also, what's the goal for?
So I didn't write it down, total entropy, but the goal I should have wrote it in is we spent too much money on art. We're getting new art made for our Pathfinder 2 campaign, and I set a budget of $200, and my players went out and found artists that cost $75 to $100 a piece, and that's who we went with. So that's like $350 just on art right there. And then we also are doing overlays and maybe some custom tip emojis. So all total, we're probably going to end up spending closer to like $500 on art for this AP. And I didn't write it down in the tip goal, but you know, we're trying to make it so that once again, the Knights of Last Call aren't cash negative. K-Swiss Deck, that Leshy cosplay is coming out of my personal bucket. Rope Mimic, did the $500 cosplay goal get met? So Rope Mimic, it was kind of decided that it would be a lot funnier if it was just me that had to cosplay. But you know, I'll let the Discord decide if we should make a goal for another one of the participants to potentially have to cosplay. But it is kind of funny when it's only just me. So let's get the goals out of the way. Okay. So my two goals are this. Goals. Okay. Goals. Okay. Create a way for the initiative to work. And as like a sub goal to that, we want to not over penalize certain conditions or debuffs, but we also don't want to overpower certain conditions or debuffs. An example of this is like we were saying before, if the creature had 3 turns per round, and each turn it gained 2 or 3 actions. If it was slowed 1, we can't have it lose 1 action each time, right? That would be, you know, overpowering the slow ability, which is already overpowered. On the other hand, we also don't want to make a condition or a debuff useless because of the creature getting multiple actions, right? But we need to strike a balance between that, and that's very much, in my opinion, tied to its initiative. So we need to create a way for the creature initiative to work in that it does not have a we avoid the problem where it's just all the party members delay and go together and the boss, you know, ends up going all of its actions all at the same time. We want to either enforce they go, we go, they go, we go, or we want to create a system, which is more complicated, that strongly disincentivizes the players from doing this because the boss will get to, you know, do something overpowered. And this is where we kind of talked about the momentum. So that's number 1. Number 2, we want to create a series of actions that feel dynamic and interesting and telegraph certain powerful moves.
abilities and can be disrupted or otherwise mitigated. We are somewhat limited because this is a turn-based RPG. But if you've ever played some sort of video game, the classic telegraph is the monster takes an action and creates a glowing zone, and everybody has to get out of the zone, right? Like before it explodes and fire. That kind of thing is kind of like what we're talking about. But I think it is cooler when you tie them to the creature, and we can use some of these abilities, maybe some of these conditions or actions which don't get a lot of love in the game. Lastly, we want interesting reactions / triggers that will change. We didn't get to this today. The look and feel of the fight as we go through it. So let me give you a great example to finish this out. Believe it or not, Northern Reaches, which was our Pathfinder 2 mega game, is actually named after a campaign of mine that I ran called Northern Reaches. And Northern Reaches was a 4th edition campaign. And at that point in time, I had understood that solos had some strengths and they had some weaknesses. And in the Northern Reaches, there was a powerful red dragon known as I'm trying to remember what his name was, like Flaminoriax or something like that, also known as Flame. Okay. And this was a powerful red dragon who was like one of the highest level monsters in the entire Northern Reaches. And the party went to fight him. Well, and this should come as no surprise if you said this stuff before, you're on the money. So this creature had a lot of the abilities like a solo, but instead of being, having a bloodied thing, he had sort of bloodied 1 and bloodied 2, which sort of represented different 1/3 and 2/3 of his hit points respectively. Now in 4th edition, you had this idea that monsters could be different roles, right? So a monster could be a soldier, where it is very defensive, very good at locking people down. A monster could be a lurker, where they're sort of high damage, and then they sort of sneak away and creep back into the shadows, sort of very assassin-y. You could have an artillery monster, a monster that stays at a distance and launches ranged attacks. You could have a brute, a big hulking monster, low armor class, but tons of damage, tons of hit points. So the way that this creature, this boss fight worked is Flame started off as as what we call a skirmisher, which just meant he was on the ground, he was moving around, he was attacking, biting, clawing. He had wings, but he wasn't really using them. So then after they dealt 1/3 of his hit points, Flame became a flying artillery. And basically he took to the skies, right? He, snarled at them and, basically said, like, in the first third of the fight, he was using a lot of claws and bite attacks and tail whips. Okay. But then in the second third of the fight, they got him to low 3rd hit points. And, I was like, okay, first bloodied. And, he snarled at them and said, you think you're so strong. Wait till you face my flame, and then with that, his wings snap open, whoom, whoom, couple big breaths, and suddenly he's airborne. And then for this second stage of the fight, he's flying around the battlefield. He's shooting breath weapons. He's spitting individual attacks of fire. And whenever he's attacking, the ground is starting to sort of get molten because of his flames. And suddenly the terrain becomes more challenging and more hazardous. And then finally, after 1/3 of the hit points, they strike him. He tumbles out of the ground he tumbles out of the sky and crashes into the ground. And the group sees that he breaks through the kind of molten crust of the magma of inside of his lair. And then with a snarl, he hurls himself back up. And now he's dripping with magma and flame. And now for the final third, he is just a full brute. And he is mad with fury and anger. And it's kind of a mix of the worst. He's rushing in. He's trampling over the party members. He's grabbing them and hurling them into pools of lava or against walls. He's not only breathing fire, but he's doing it onto himself. It's more of an aura of flame. The magma is dripping off of him, right? It's very, very much scary and intense. And then finally he dies. So
this kind of third element here is we want the fight at the beginning to feel different than it does at the end. We want the creature to gain abilities or lose abilities. We want the creatures, you know, their stats can change a little bit, maybe. They can, you know, alter, like one of the coolest monsters. This is even before 4th edition. When they were working on 3rd edition, they did Monster Manual 4 for 3.5 edition. I've talked about this before. And there was they're kind of play testing some of the concepts that would come into 4th edition. But they had a creature called the Magma Core Golem. And this creature was like this sort of like, it's like an iron golem made of plates and rivets, and it had like a furnace burning inside of it. Okay. And you fought it, and it had like high AC smash damage, right? But once you got it to 50% hit points, like the iron plates fell away, right? And it reveals the sort of burning interior of the golem. And the creature's AC drops. It gains a flame fire aura, fire attacks, and even I think like a 20% concealment from like the heat and the haze of the burning furnace. And I think it even gained maybe some sort of like AoE cone attack. Point is, the second part of this fight was very different than the first part of this fight. You know, after a couple rounds of fighting a creature, it gets boring. You go, okay, we get what this thing does. Right? Round 1, you're like, oh. Round 2, you're like, okay. Round 3, you're like, yep, we get it. We know what this thing does. And then when you have this cool changing moment, it's almost like you're getting 2 fights for the price of 1. And so I think that those are really, really fun for these big, you know, maybe these kind of fights are not something that you should be doing every session, right? This is like a once or twice per adventure. You know, over the course of a 20-level campaign, you might only have 6 or 7 fights like this. But ideally, these are very, you know, memorable, very mechanical. You know, I think that is really important. Listen, shout out to Rope Mimic for this topic idea. Yes, this was all Rope Mimic's idea too. Yes, I understand that this is very clearly Dragon Ball Z-esque, with them sort of powering up and changing their forms. Now, that being said, is this gamey? Yes. Is this, you know, video gamey? Yes. But, you know, it's definitely more of a board game type feel. But there are a lot of elements in Pathfinder 2 that are very much about making a tactical miniature board game. Very similar to, you guessed it, very similar to the Dungeons and Dragons miniatures game, right? The Dungeons and Dragons miniature game, very similar to Pathfinder 2. In fact, you could use Pathfinder 2 and play it as the D&D miniatures game. It would be pretty interesting. And so I think that a lot of these same concepts can be applied to it. Okay. Role-playing game does indeed have the word game in it. But you know what? The thing about it, Explosions, is I've played role-playing games where the entire session was all about coming to terms with whether or not someone, you know, hated their father or not. And that was like the entire session. And that's fine. That's role-playing games. But role-playing games can be so many different things. And that's why it's important that we understand that different types of role-playing games are good for different people. And we can, you know, we can embrace that. We can, instead of debating it, my only thing about it is play a role-playing game that's good for it. We're talking about creating boss fight telegraph mechanics, Dark Souls style, yada, yada, yada. And that's great. Pathfinder 2 will be great at doing that, okay? And you can do it and not have it be soulless. Like, you can have it and have it be very evocative, and you can add a lot of fluffy bullshit on top of it and make it sound cool and make it feel like a really cool narrative moment. But I would never use, you know, these kind of mechanics, you know, in a game of Blades in the Dark. That's a different game with a completely different design ethos and a completely different design philosophy. So, you know, Pathfinder 2 is a more heavily game role-playing game, and so we can lean into that. And it's also a very, you know, look at your class feats, okay? 99% of your class feats are about combat. for the most part. And so, you know, definitely a lot of your spells, a lot of your abilities, a lot of your character sheet, hell, even some of your skills, a lot of your skills, you know, athletics, you're like, oh, it's for jumping. You're like, yeah, it's also for disarming, shoving, tripping, and grappling, right? So there's a lot of stuff in your character sheet in Pathfinder 2 that's about combat. So to pretend that that is anything different is not crazy. Gamey, but awesome. I agree. I'm all for making my campaign more like a Dark Souls, at least in terms of combat encounters. Do you think those telegraph things should be interrupted by things on a thing basis or creature basis? The latter could make it more simpler. The former will allow more for different things. That's an interesting point, Queso Stick. I don't know. I think we'd have to think about that. It's interesting. I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, we're talking about bosses in a tactical RPG. That's right. We are taking Pathfinder 2. I don't know if we ever officially gave Pathfinder 2 a GNS score, but we are taking Pathfinder 2's GNS score, and we are taking the G score, that's the gamist part of it, and we are adding a point or two to make it a more interesting game and to make these boss fights a more compelling, interesting tactical exercise. So that's where we're at. I think, Damien, we may have a t-shirt now that says Fluffy Bullshit Time on the back of it. So, all right, everybody. Thank you for joining me this evening. Thank you for being wonderful. If you are a member of the Patreon, thank you for your support. And if you're not, what are you waiting for? It's great, and I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about this tonight and tomorrow and go into Thursday. And it sounds like the people have spoken. We might be doing this, continuing this going on. Oh, homework. Yeah, homework. So you need to figure out, I said what your homework is. You need to solve the initiative problem. You need to come up with it. Remember, our template here is Red Dragon. Actually, you should come up with a series of generic boss abilities that all solos and all bosses can be used. But like, come up with a list of abilities that may be generic and maybe specific. Homer, pick one. All right, fine. Solve the initiative issue. That's the biggest issue. Solve the initiative issue. For me personally, that's the biggest issue. And we need a way to do it in a way that doesn't feel kludgy and just heavy-handed. And has a degree of elegance to it. So, all right, everybody. Figure it out. We'll be back Thursday. We'll be back next week and Tuesday with our AP session number 1, Quest for the Frozen Flame. I'm going to be joined by Bob, Tim, Smith, and our new fella, Kaz. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well. I will see you all next time on Knights of Last Call. Horizon Thought.